Welcome to episode 103 of the Coast to Coast AFL podcast from Nick and Blaze. I am Blaze, your host, and in this one, Anzac Appeal Round has come and gone. The great Anzac Eve and Anzac Day clashes have once again passed us. And with it came a very interesting round. A lot of uphill battles from underdog teams, a lot of very close games. There was one win in there that was very surprising to a lot of people. We will talk about that. But overall, apart from certain things that we will be very much discussing, I think it's a very successful round, and we will jump very deep into all of the goings on. But first of all, how are you doing, Mr. Cyrus?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. I would call it a successful round. I think there was just like a lot of fan base that are pretty happy. But everyone would just agree that everything outside the actual playing of AFL football was pretty garbage.
Yeah, this is true.
Yeah. But yes, apart from that, I'm okay. I went to a concert last week, which was fun. Joey Balance and I can't remember whatever order their names are. There are only two people.
Yeah, fair enough.
But anyway, so it was fun. It was at a nightclub which I hadn't been to, even though it was like the most popular nightclub in Perth, and it was pretty good. Except they were TikTok famous, which I wasn't aware of. So there were a lot of young people there. So I got to reconnect with the youth. And I also stuffed up both my calves because they were like, oh, jump around. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I'll jump around. And then my calves were like, no, that isn't a good idea. I have blessed you with calf awareness. I almost had to rule myself out of anything. Like I wasn't scheduled to play.
You were an AFL footballer for a brief moment, but then no longer.
Yeah, got the very aware calves, but apart from that, not too bad. Bit tired, but apart from that, pretty good week. And obviously, from the result, pretty happy with football itself.
Yep. I can't quite say the same about my result, but I am still pretty happy about what I saw in terms of player-wise. We'll talk about that. My week was pretty good. Work was fairly easy. Personal life stuff going well. I'm still slowly moving things out of here and into my new place. It's a slow process. I've still got I've got like just under 3 weeks until everything is out. So I'm slowly chipping away at packing. It's mostly just like the Lego and stuff, all the smaller stuff that I'm like really struggling to figure out how I'm going to pack it. Because like on one hand, I don't want to disassemble it because I don't know when I'm going to find the time or the energy to reassemble it. And then on the other side of it, it's like how do I don't even remember how I did it the first time, honestly. So that's my dilemma at the moment. Otherwise, everything else isn't too bad. Like my kitchen will be pretty easy to pack up, my bathroom, my bedroom. It's just all of the stuff behind me is the hard part. But yeah, no, things are pretty good, and I think it's time we jump straight into the goings on, and we have a bit of news to start with Premiership 2019 Premiership ruckman Ivan Soldo has called time on his career.
Yeah, and this is obviously an interesting one because obviously played for both our teams, Port Adelaide versus and Richmond.
One of the very few times we actually have like a
yeah, because I was going to say,
I think Schultz was
the last time would have been Jay Schultz, wouldn't it? Yeah. Who obviously a very nice pickup for Port.
The next one could potentially be Zach Butters. I'm not going to say no.
I'm not going to say no. Well, we'll have to see about that. But yeah, he does retire. So really, he was a very late pickup, very much a project. Ruckman, round 5, pick 68 of the rookie draft in 2014. So even though he's only a 66 gamer, it's not a bad return from a low investment player. And sort of just, I'd say he was, when the Tigers were starting to rebuild a bit, obviously won the premiership in,
2019.
2019. Yeah. So, obviously very good there. Back up to Nankervis. And, just sort of, I would say for the Tigers, he was just mostly known for plugging in whenever they had a back or a forward shortage. Wasn't always a ruckman. As I said, Nankervis was thankfully healthy enough to where he didn't need to take too many games. He would always pinch hit, obviously.
Yes.
And then, just sort of try to seek out another team for more opportunity. Nankervis, they were starting to bring in some more holes into their ruck stock. So it was like, well, my time here is probably done for. I'll go take my chance at the power. Honestly, we looked at the trade. Richmond got a fairly good return. It was a lot of low value draft picks, but that was at the time where you could trade them off to teams looking to get academy players. So I imagine when you look at it, they probably got a very decent return for it.
Yeah, I can't
And
entirely remember
unfortunately,
how what ended up with those draft picks. I think some of them would have equated to a player, even though he was drafted much earlier, but like a player like Jack Ross and like players
yeah,
of that sort of caliber that have been in the system a couple of years now, still very much developing, but are looking like decent. Honestly, I can't remember who was in that draft. Yeah, I might actually look at it whilst
yeah.
we're talking about it. But yeah,
I wouldn't
like
imagine it would be
it's
Jack Ross. I thought that
no, Jack
was
Ross was
a
like
year.
2018, 2019 draft. Like,
Yeah,
but I'm
yeah.
looking players like
Oh, you mean equate? Yeah, yeah. I get you.
equating
I
to
get
him.
you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So anyway, unfortunately, went to the power. Sort of just played okay in his first season. But Jordan Sweet just seemed better. And then he got into the park once in 2025. I think Sweetie might have been injured or had a suspension and did his ACL. And he hasn't been cited since. So he was out of contract this year. So he just did well, as I said, it's weird. Like a lot of Port fans are a tiny bit bitter. I think more so just because they dislike some of the trades that went on at that time. You know, but most of them wanted Soldo over Sweet anyway. So I mean, you know, you can't really complain with the form that Sweet's in at the moment. Disliking those two trades, but it is what it is. And yeah, Soldo, you know, did the right thing by the club and just announced his retirement. Opens up a list spot in the mid season draft. So yeah, as I said, um, yeah, it's not really too much to say. As I said, he was at best, a decent role player. Probably had a bit more potential if he found a right club or, club at a decent time. But yeah, as I said, it was just, Port made the decision to, sort of hedge their bets with two ruckmen, two older ruckmen while Vicentini develops. And yeah, he was just the wrong side of that equation.
Yeah, it was just like really. It felt like just really unfortunate kind of timing that he goes over there looking to play the number one ruck spot and get more and get more game time, and then Jordan Sweet just kind of comes out of nowhere and like proves he can be the man for the job. And a couple of years later, he still is and is still serving Port Adelaide very well.
Well, we're going to talk about his game, but yeah, he's had a lot of big games. Obviously, he's a bit up and down, but like definitely you'd take his output over Soldo. Both around the same. He's a bit younger too, I think, Jordan Sweet. Soldo being 30 at the time of this year. So yeah, as I said, it's yeah, just unfortunate. Yeah, John Sweet, 28 years old, so even has a couple more years of ruck prime to go. So, what can you do really?
Which
Um,
um which picks did you say that Richmond got for the Soldo trade?
have to go back to my history, but I think it was a couple of fourth rounders, a future fourth, and a future second from the Dockers.
What were the ones used in that season? Was it 40 and 43?
It might be. Sounds familiar. I've got the article now. 41 and 49.
Okay, so they must have been traded elsewhere because pick
Mm,
41 is Ollie Murphy to Fremantle and pick 49 is Harvey Johnston to West Coast. Um,
mm.
but the picks that we did use in that year's draft was pick 40 for Kane McAuliffe, who played a very, very good game over the weekend, and pick 43 for
Mm.
Liam Fawcett.
And you take
And they're
it.
the only
So
two
yeah, so
players we
the
got from
other,
that draft.
yeah, and the next draft would be a future Freo second and Port's fourth rounder, which probably ended up being,
Which we would have
ooh,
ended up using for because 2024 draft was the year we got all of we went hard in the rebuild and got like eight
yeah,
players.
exactly. So yeah, anyway, so it was like Richmond did some very savvy trading during that period. Like, as much you could go on about their on-field success or lack of success. Obviously, there's a lot of things going around that with injury and all that. They've definitely, at least for the future, gotten as much value as they can with the draft picks that they've been, well, not handed, but as that they've acquired. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's in on one hand, it was a very successful draft for not draft. It's a very successful trade for Richmond. But on the other hand, we're in a period of time where we could really use a good ruckman. It's just unfortunate that he's no longer with us and now has officially retired from the scene.
Yeah, well, as I said, he's back to Melbourne. He'll be, rehabbing on his, well, not on his own, but you know what I mean. As I said, obviously, I think normally, you'll just expect the club to help, rehab and all that, and maybe they'll get some support or whatever. Sometimes they can work out some off-field thing, but yeah, he just wants to move back to Melbourne. So he'll work out what he wants to do from there, whether he goes back to football, looks at a coaching capacity or something like that, or whatever he wants to do. Yeah, as I said, he'll be back home, supported, and as I said, had a small little nice career playing a premiership, which not all players tend to do. And yeah, for that, I think it's time to salute our first in-season retirement.
Yes, because according to the AFL, James Harmes counts as last season retirement for some odd reason.
Yeah, it was second 2026, first in-season.
Yes.
Pretty much.
Going off of this retirement, we will now jump over to the games. Starting with our Thursday night clash at Marvel Stadium between the Bulldogs and the Swans, the 2016 Premiership rematch. Because it's been 10 years since the 2016 Premiership. And with a 66-point margin, the Swans were very obviously going to win out on this one, 18-18, 126 to 9-6-60.
Yeah, it was more continued pain for the Bulldogs. I will also say it was also the VFL Premiership, so they had both sides, which is nice. I really like it when they have a bit of overlap. So like, you know what? Let's celebrate both. Part of the system. Really good to see. So yeah, full credit for the Bulldogs of that. But apart from that, it was pretty much pain. Wasn't a bad game for the first half. Bulldogs worked hard, got some intercept, dominated on ground level. But yeah, another ruck smashing, limited their ability to score off clearances, which we know as a team they love to do. And the Swans absolutely killed it in movement and especially scoring efficiency inside 15. Maybe not goals so much, but they have done a really good job of being able to score this year. Probably one of the best offenses in the league. And yeah, Swans even took a chance to play for youngsters, with the debutant Edwards doing well on the other youngster, Will Lewis. I think he's probably like a 10-game player for the Bulldogs, playing in the forward line, pretty much wrapped up the whole game. I should say I only watched at this. I can't say any specific ones. Only really going off stats and what I saw, glancing when I do my streams on Thursday. And yeah, as I said, meanwhile, Smith for the Bulldogs, at least offensively, did a good job against the God Grundy performance. I should say Smith was a debutant ruckman for the Bulldogs, which is why I want to give him a bit of props because, as I said, talking about the stream title, it was an uphill battle, going up against Grundy in his form. So we said that there's a bit of a gap between the top two ruckmen in the comp, and I think we have to say it's top three now. Like, Grundy has ascended to the heights of Jackson and Gawn.
Yeah, agreed. Funnily enough,
yeah.
You know what links all three of those players? They all played for Melbourne.
Yeah. True. Yeah, I was gonna say.
That's all I got for you.
Yeah. Sorry, I was thinking there was another link too from that, but I mean there probably is, but I was mistaken. Anyway, so yeah, Bustlinger kept the Mikuro or McDonald quiet. That's another like little bonus for the Bulldogs. But yeah, as I said, I think watching this game, I don't think the individual efforts were terrible for the Dogs as much as this was a spanking. but it was a lack of territory
Mm-hmm.
that really killed him. The Swans, if you give them a bit of time and space on the outside, they'll absolutely crush you. I'm going to talk about it in a second, just how good Swans are at moving the ball and creating inside 50s. But I will say the Dogs actually did good converting their limited chances. Like, they didn't have much to work with, and they still did something.
Yeah, they
Like,
were very much.
this game almost felt better than a 66-point loss.
Yeah, like they were getting. I feel like the scoreboard or the final score doesn't really tell the entire story of this game. Like, granted, yeah, they were getting beaten all around the ground, but there were individual efforts across the board. A lot of it, especially from Bont, even though he's basically playing on one leg. Um, like to really try and keep the Dogs in it. Like his work through the midfield and when he was able to push forward has always been excellent. It was outstanding again in this game, even though there was not that much support around him. Obviously their injury woes are huge right now, and that's why they're struggling so much against the top end teams. Well, against most teams in general right now. But the fact that they were still able to do so much with their limited opportunities, Aaron Norton, up until his awkward landing, looked fantastic. There was still so much to like, especially from the younger kids, as well as like the Dogs do have decent depth. It's just about getting that experience into that depth and cultivating them into like the proper sort of like filler players that they kind of need right now before retirements start to hit.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, like a few of these players, we think they're going. I mean, Lachlan Smith, for a clear example. Like, you're checking into him raw, you expect to get some things away. And, they've got a few players that, are decent, but probably shouldn't be a week in, week out sort of thing.
Yeah.
Talking about your, like, Josh Dolans, your Will Lewis, Keeper Hines, all that sort of stuff. But, as I said, like, Bustlinger gets a few games. He was a very hyped pick from last year. As I said, I think that Riley Sanders playing full midfield minutes did his job. He had a very solid performance, especially since it's harder when you go into the midfield because other ball winners are taken out of the equation. Treloar, in his first game back for ages, I thought was fairly good. So, as I said, it's just take what you will. But, as I said, their defense, it's, like, in the first, I think the good thing about this is like you take it because in the first few games, like they did have genuine improvement in the back half, and I think that's like the most important thing because it was always going to be hard to fix that from one season, and they didn't exactly bring in too many players to do that. It was a very minor changes, but then once you start taking players out, it's very hard to maintain. And, the fact that it was really only falling away at the end, it is what it is. But yeah, as I said, for Sydney, I mean, it was just like the really good players playing well. Sheldrick, I think, is like one of those players that are starting. I think they're like quiet achievers where I think like Sydney fans are very happy that Angus Sheldrick just like is starting to become a full-timer.
He was also very much one of those players
wrong.
that like we highlighted in the off season too to keep an eye on because he was having really solid performances in the second half of last season, and like just now he's really starting to shape up as like a key midfielder.
Yeah, he's just been pretty protected with time on ground. Like even this game, it was only 65%. But he's one of those players that I think like Andrew Brayshaw early in his career when he used to get that. When they were just like, okay, you're building your tank. We want you to run as a two-way player, so we're going to play you less time. But as I said, we want you to make those defensive efforts and all that. Make the most of your impact when you're on field, and he's a player that definitely does that.
Yeah, exactly.
And all the other things. Joel Amati, as I said, I think he's done a really good job of still being present and not just relying on Charlie Curnow.
I think Amati's
having a fantastic season.
Found a lot more confidence in his forward craft this season, and that's why he's been able to produce much better performances as of late compared to his past couple of seasons where he's been extremely hot and cold.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is unfortunately, like Swans always play three, but they can only ever find two because as I said, Logan McDonald, and obviously with the injury of what's his name, Hayden McLean.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's not McCartan.
Yeah,
McCartan's in the back line, so it's got to be McLean.
yeah. So so they can't quite find it, but again, solid performances. But I mean, most people who've watched Sydney, aren't too surprised by this. They have been a very good team. But one thing I do want to highlight, and I know the Swans have had a pretty good run over the last few weeks. And again, like come the end of the season, this is what's going to make them top four candidates. And it's a bit of in-season luck. It's like finding teams at the good time. They played, I think it was Brisbane when they lost all three defenders.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I think that was the only other one, but it's still a big deal. But right now, the Swans have a 13.7 inside differential for the year. So that is, they get 13.7 inside 50s more than their opponents per game, which is well ahead of the Gold Coast and surprisingly Port, who I shared second with. I think it's 8.4.
Yeah.
So, as I said, it's still really decent, but almost half of what the Swans are doing. And again, it's only a quarter. And again, their inside 50 counters only dipped below 60 once, and they now have 2 70s in a row, and the AFL average is 53. They have the 4th highest goals per inside 50 in the league, and you have, as I said earlier, unarguably the best offense in football at the moment for the first quarter of the season, and probably going to stay for quite a while, because it would take a little bit, because it's not, like Charlie Curnow has even been, he took a tiny bit to get going.
Yeah,
but they've just, I think one of the biggest criticisms was, Sydney might change their game style to suit Curnow. But they've actually forced Curnow to play within the Sydney style, which has actually kept their other avenues of scoring. So they've almost made a cumulative wave. Also, Malcolm Roses on the ground has probably been better than most people have expected. So,
yep.
As I said, even though it was academic, I think it is worth highlighting how good the Swans have been up until this point.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. The fact that he's been able to adapt really, really, I wouldn't say really, really easily, but fairly smoothly into the Swan system, both him and Malcolm Roses. And they've both just kind of really taken advantage of the fact that they have really solid talent around them that is able to support them in what they do. Curnow especially, he was brought in to be that number one forward. And he is already ticking so many of their boxes just purely from what he does. And the fact that they're not even technically at full strength because they're still missing Goulden. McLean is currently injured as well, even though he's 50-50 on whether he's probably a required player at this point in time, provided Amati and Curnow continue to do what they do.
Yeah, it's just accountable depth, sort of. It means that you can cycle through. The West Australian.
Yes.
When he gets out of form, Logan McDonald.
That's right. So yeah, the fact that the Swans still technically aren't even at 100% and are still producing some fantastic results, just goes to show that they are really in their prime once again. And it's still very early in the season to 100% call it, but this is likely a team that will be going for another finals tilt, and whether this is the year that they finally get over their grand final woes and actually win a grand final, over, when was the last grand final they won? 13 years. Was it 2012?
It was 2012, yeah.
14 years?
Which is 14 years ago. Yeah.
That would be huge. But again, still way too early to call. Again, they could end up falling into the woes of the Western Bulldogs. Pray tell they don't. But they are looking monstrous right now, and it's going to be very, very difficult for teams to start stopping them.
Yeah, because as I said, even in those last few years, we've said, Errol Gordon takes away a lot of their movement. But, 2 years ago when he had that injury. But, this year's just night and day, as I said. Just the ability to introduce new players, especially for a second-year coach. Dean Cox, I wasn't doubting him last year. It was just like a lot of moves. I was just wondering where it was leading to.
Mhm.
I changed a lot of the system. Obviously went on to very one-on-one defense, a bit less on intercept than other years. Simplified a lot of the forward line, even though, I don't think the forwards were quite providing in that system. But, as I said, it did prove like once you put a decent marking forward in, you start to get a lot more conversion from it. So yeah, as I said, whatever is built, like, as I said, it's improved after, the year, and yeah, as I said, they deserve all the accolades they're getting at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. On the injury side of things, the only injury in this game was to Aaron Norton and his neck due to their awkward landing in a marking contest. Thankfully, he did avoid major damage. Tentatively, he's only supposedly going to be out for maybe a couple of weeks. Thankfully, not too serious. But pray tell he comes back soon because they do not have a forward line right now without him. Pretty much.
Yeah.
And then on the
Was
MRO
it
side of
Norton,
things,
Darcy, Vandermeer? There's another one too, isn't there?
there is another one. I think it's a small forward.
Oh,
I'm blanking
yeah,
on
yeah,
it.
yeah. The one that was like, it was the one that came in and then, got out. Artie Jones.
Artie Jones, that's right.
Riley
Yeah.
Garcia too.
Oh yeah, they are missing
Waitman.
Garcia.
I haven't
And
even mentioned Waitman.
Waitman's been out as a long-term injury for a while, so that's
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
fair. Like he's missed a good chunk of footy, and he still won't be back this season.
Yeah. No, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Then on the MRO side of things, Nick Blakey was the only fine for this game, copying a $2,000 fine for rough conduct against Will Lewis. And that pretty much wraps up Thursday night. So we're going to jump over to our traditional Anzac Eve clash, which coincidentally happens on a Friday night. It's really interesting that like the Anzac Eve Anzac Day actually really fit neatly into a weekend, which it very rarely happens for marquee games.
Yeah.
But
No, exactly. So and it made this round very enjoyable to watch
and
because as I said there were a lot of blowouts, but it was very good to like switch in and out of games.
and it's like it's not really,
Yeah.
and it's like because of the fact that it fit really nicely into a weekend means it wasn't like awkward for people to like get
Mm.
to. With Anzac Eve always being a night game. I was fortunately able to be there for this one of the very few games I'm actually going to get to see this year. It's always nice. I'm hoping I'll still be able to go to Dreamtime later this year, which will be good. But with a 54-point margin between Richmond and the Melbourne Demons, the Demons did win out 19-12, 126 to 11-6, 72. But don't let that scoreline fool you because there was so much more going on in this game than what that tells you just on the basis.
A lot going on this non-controversial, non-stary. I mean, yeah, as you said, it was actually a solid effort. A bit of a smacking, but still a solid effort. Despite the umpiring as well. The Tigers did run out of legs in this contest.
We did.
Again, I don't blame them for like how whacked the momentum was because of what was happening all night. But at the end of the day, a Demons outfit, they're in some pretty good form. Kept the Richmond defense occupied all night. And, while I didn't think they did terribly, it was definitely, a lot more scoring shots than Richmond would have liked to, had. Yeah, and it wasn't even the most stat-filled night. It was very interesting because Melbourne, again, like we've seen a bit this year, they're very long and direct approach to goal. Pretty much won them on the outside. But Richmond was still very impressive trying to get the contest. Their contested stats were pretty good. Their stoppages weren't too bad until a bit later on in the contest. And even their ball use, like for the first 3 quarters, I actually thought it was actually pretty decent. It started to fade, I think, in the last quarter. And, as I said, their decent plans of attack actually led to some pretty nice conversion from some very limited scoring opportunities. As I said, like territory, and we'll talk about it in a bit, it's a pretty big issue for Richmond at the moment. But they're starting to actually get some decent conversion, which is pretty impressive because they don't have that much talent in that forward line. Obviously, no offense, but,
No, you're not wrong.
it's pretty hard,
I
to deny.
I definitely think Tom Lynch coming back gave our forward line a lot more confidence because we had a reliable tall forward. And he looked really good. He looked competitive. He went for a lot of second and third efforts if he wasn't able to mark the ball. He kicked 2 goals, I think 2 or 3, which is always which was good. What do you kick? 1? I can't remember.
1 goal, 1.
1 goal, 1. That's right. But like he was
still
still
good in the contest,
he was still presenting well. Even though we didn't have the crummers around him all of the time, he was still doing well in contests, bringing it to ground when needed.
Yeah, that's the one knock on him, I will say, is that he doesn't bring the ball to ground enough. But, as I said, he did make that up with the seconds efforts. He put a lot of tackling pressure, or even tackles that didn't stick, just trying to force that back half turnover, back into the Richmond hands. It was still good. Just never been style.
The biggest surprise, I think, for everyone is Noah Bolter starting in the ruck against Max Gawn, which I think was a very successful experiment, because I think it threw Max off his game because they're both very similar builds. Max probably would have walked in there thinking he's going to come up against Samson Ryan, who does not have the body size, will just easily get pushed around, and did every time it happened. But having Bolter in the ruck, someone who's actually able to match Gawn's physicality, was made for such an interesting contest without Nank there. And the fact that we were able to win quite a few centre bounce attendances as well, get a couple of clearances out of it, and even kick the first 2 goals of the game off of that, really shows that Bolter is such a talented swingman, and I really appreciate that he was this is something that they were actively working on purely to come up against the best ruck in the competition. I like that we went in with a plan to surprise them, and for the most part it worked out.
And sometimes they were just looking for the Max Heath swap, who I actually thought was pretty decent.
I thought he had a fairly solid
I don't
game.
think he's much of a forward. But at the same time, it is definitely a period of time where you can be looking to work them in. As said, we've talked about 5 on the bench, and I think that's actually opened up the doors to test out your second ruck a bit more. We've seen a lot more ruck splits this year than I think we have in other years, partially due to injury, teams like Richmond, Western Bulldogs is another one. North Melbourne when Sherry got suspended. So, so it's been interesting to see. But as I said, I don't really fault too much of the ground level contest when Richmond were able to get there. But as I said, it was really just the outside uncontested work. But Melbourne have been really good at moving the ball. I will just say, it's probably a hard ask for Richmond when it's not really their game style.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's a lot of that, especially for this game itself, did really come down to those momentum shifts.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, this game, it was lots of things about this, might have been too bad. It's sometimes it's a one side gets a lot of free kicks, one side doesn't. And again, it goes into the theory that, contested teams tend to give away free kicks. Yeah, that's whatever.
High free kick count from one team to another is kind of standard in the AFL nowadays. But in this one, it felt a lot more egregious. And it turns out that Richmond supporters were not the only ones thinking this.
Yeah, because it was a lot of different rules, as I said, we had, all year, pushing the back's been ignored, but there were a few, I think Richmond was the first time I've seen it called in ages. Maybe it wasn't the Richmond game, but the way it probably felt like it. What was it? Holding the ball was very weird. Holding the man was very weird. It was just, it just really didn't favor a team trying to, get contested. And I sometimes get it, as an umpiring system, you might, not want to encourage teams to just dog teams that are above them on the ladder. But this was just so weird and, up and down in terms of it. I think there was also some uncontested, sort of frees that were. Anyway, this match didn't really stick too long in my head. I'm sure there's a pretty good compilation, but it was pretty bad. I have written at the end of the Richmond analysis that I do think there's a lot of happy performances as well. Brown being probably the big one. Rechko, second game, absolutely fantastic. Seth Campbell like, he is a player that I am getting a bit more excited about. Like, when I watch him, he does remind me of like 2024 Nick Larkey. Not Nick Larkey, Paul Curtis.
Ah, yes.
Where you look at him and it's like he really makes the lot of some very, mediocre entrance to the 450. Like, he's scoring goals, but he's often getting the ball like high up into the 50, has like another defender on him, and he still actually does something useful with the ball, whether it's distribution, whether
He
it's
showed a
kicking
lot of
himself.
versatility in this game, and I think it's a really and like he's even though he's tall, he's not like Tom Lynch kind of tall. He's not like a super tall
Yeah.
forward. He's a medium sized forward, but he
He'd
presents
be like
like
a
he's really
Zerha height.
tall. Yeah, he's like a Zoha kind
Yeah.
of player. But he presents really well. He's able to find space in his one-on-one contests to where he's able, whether it's to mark, he's at least able to kind of create a run-on contest. Able to keep the ball moving, and I think it's a really, really good talent to have in our sort of current team that very much is trying to thrive on that chaos ball again.
Yeah, exactly. So, as I said, and like you say, it does help, when Richmond don't get the most exciting entries into their forward 50.
Oh yeah.
When you have a player that's both decent in the air and on the ground. And Kane McAuliffe also had a pretty good game.
McAuliffe
and of course,
had a fantastic game. I was very impressed.
Yeah. And Cumming, nice goal. Could have been 2, but, as I said, you'll take it either way. And you support well for a first gamer. So, it's a huge,
I even think
realm of players.
he probably won't get much mention, but I even think Tom Burton had a very decent game for a debut as well. Very much underrated. Didn't get many touches or anything like that, but I think his work rate in terms of pressure was really good. James Trezise, who was a late change, because Jaden Short went out because his wife went into labour. Was
also happy news for Richmond.
Yes, always good to have another cub in the family. Was very good coming in. I think he played really, really well along that back half, especially combining with Tom Brown and Rechko. I do really like that. Vlosten looked really solid. Hopper looked really solid. The weird thing about Hopper, and I was theorizing this during the game, is that like I think him and Taranto play too similar of a role that when both of them are in, Taranto's the one that kind of stars and Hopper kind of just gets like...
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's like Hopper's just like Taranto light a bit. He's just not quite as good with the ball in hand. But, as I said, he was very serviceable. It provides contest, which is sort of what Richmond need, especially when you don't have Taranto. So
yeah, the only player that I was probably maybe a little bit disappointed in was Broad. And I think that's purely for the fact that we know this is likely his last year, because he confirmed when he re-signed that he's only going to play 2 more years and then probably call it quits. So we know this is likely his last season. If he gets one more, it'll be because he's going to go over back to WA, potentially. Maybe most likely to West Coast because Freo don't really need him.
Yeah, I was going to say I don't think Freo.
But like it's not that I'm saying like he's like phoning it in every week. I think it's just the fact that his body's starting to kind of catch up.
Yeah,
he looks he's still doing decently well in contests, but it's his speed that's starting to lack and things like that, which is sad. But he's like 33, 34. Yeah. He's getting on. But yeah, no. Otherwise, up until when we started running out of legs in the fourth quarter, I was very impressed with like the actual team performance. Just not when the momentum shifts because of the umpires.
Yeah, exactly. And look, as I said, it was a fair chance that Melbourne had a lot of, top end talent that would have separated them. As I said, just didn't feel like whatever it was, like a 56 point margin or whatever it was. Yeah, because as I said, like on the flip side, Cosy Pickett, I think we've got to be talking to him as look, as I said, I sort of said it a bit before, but I think a few players are getting onto this, like as a top 5 player in the league.
Oh yeah, he's
full stop.
He's insane. Like, did you see that mark in the fourth quarter?
Yeah, and that was like in dead time. That was just to show off.
Yeah, he was just having a bit of fun on that one.
I'm having a good season, but what if I win a... Oh, it's not car anymore. I think it's velocity points or something, but, still pretty good. So yeah, as I said, and 4 goals, and a lot of clearances. Yeah, as I said, absolutely fantastic. And then as I said, it wasn't just him. Like the whole inside midfield group. Like again, we're talking about Sparrow and Windsor, backing him up, and yeah, well, Jack Steele as well. But
You got to throw
when we're
Jackson onto
talking
that.
about
25 touches,
yeah, yeah.
18 contested possessions, something like that.
Hmm.
8 clearances. He had a huge game.
Yeah, but I was also saying is like it's not feasting off like a fully stacked bully ball midfield. Like it's well balanced and I like what they're doing, but like Tom Sparrow is, Tom Sparrow.
Hmm.
He's a lot more decent than we, first thought in this midfield role. But like, as I said, you got to be planning out fairly well to get that much. Uh, what do you call it? Um, Positive outcome from that. And so they're really so full credit to King and whoever their midfield coach is, because again, that was a lot of player movement to deal with. Like I don't really care if they were moving on from them anyway. Like you're basically starting from scratch. And in the first half of the season, well, even earlier, like he's been able to show that it's not a problem. We've seen their best work, and then as I said, and then they can just, as we said with Melbourne, it's all about bringing up the other kids. Matthew Jefferson, he was a bit shaky, I thought, in his other games this year. Kicks a couple of nice goals. Bailey Laurie does some okay things on the wing. Even Harvey Langford, he had a bit of a quiet game. Still chips in with a goal. As I said, the only downside, which is probably what you're going to talk about next, is the one major injury in this
Yes.
game.
Before I touch on that, though, you did ask who their midfield coach is, and it's none other than Demons legend Nathan Jones.
There you go. There you go. So,
With
as I said, hard nut and hard thinker, it seems like.
with former Richmond player Troy Chaplin as an assistant coach, Jared Rivers as backline defense coach. They've also got Mark Jamar as a ruck coach, Matthew Scarlett as a specialist coach, and Jack Viney's brother, I think, Max Viney, as a tackling
Mm.
and grappling coach. So, which is why
Oh, that would make
they're
sense.
a team that knows how to tackle and knows how to stick
Yeah,
their
exactly.
tackles.
Oh, and that's a good mix. I always think it's like you need a good mix of like, what would you call it? I'll say handy utility players. I think utility players tend to make good assistants. And then obviously a few legends here and there. Because some of them, like Scarlett, like he just had to be a next level thinker from what he was doing before anyone else
Oh yeah,
was.
that 7-9-11 stretch of Geelong players were all
Yeah.
doing things that like were so different, and they were all very
Mm.
much always. There were a lot of those players always seemed to be thinking like 5 steps ahead in terms of like everything that they did, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah. So again, yeah, nice little thing. Also like just for a little note, as I said, like when you look at Melbourne and their stats, like statistically, they're not that dominant in any particular areas. But as I said, it's just from what we've seen, they're so well rounded.
They're very consistent in what
You
they
know,
do.
yeah, exactly. And as I said, the only negative I would say is like because they've gone a bit more offensive based, the defense can be a bit more exposed. I think that the opposition scoring rate, with them has been fairly high, but it's led to like much more exciting football. So I don't think these fans are gonna care. It's very night and day watching Lake Goodwin versus Early King
Oh yeah,
Demons, and I think it's pretty much for the better.
very much so. But yes, over on the injury side of things, there is only one injury, and it's a very sad one with Jai Cully
Mm,
suffering an ACL injury, eliminating him from the rest of the season. It's very sad because he's a fan favorite
yeah.
already, despite being such a young player. And he's always such a joy. It's been such a joy to watch. Prior to the injury in this game, he looked fantastic to watch as well. So it's really sad. And then, not technically an injury, but obviously Jaden Short being a late change, due to having a kid. It's just a minor little mention on that one, but nothing on the MRO side of things. Honestly, there's nothing from Friday night. There's nothing from any of the Saturday games either, and there's like only 2 from the Sunday games. So it's a very very quiet week on the MRO front.
Well behaved. We like to see it. You gotta show a bit of respect in front of the
Not
troops.
even not even any
So
players running into umpires this week, which is even more impressive.
No, exactly. Well, despite that, which game was
It
it
was this one.
that had the?
He,
Oh, was it this
he,
one that
he
had the
was he
umpire
was running
injury?
backwards. Ball came at him. He fell
Yeah,
over. Somehow broke his arm in 3 places. Don't
I
ask
felt
me.
so bad because like I thought he just got hit in the nuts, and
That's what
like
everyone
yeah,
thought. Like he probably just got like hit
I
in the
don't
body
yeah,
somewhere and just kind of fell
and I
over.
was
But
like,
no,
oh,
he
that's funny, but like
somehow
he's
broke
gonna
his
get
arm.
up, but it's like yeah, free broken bones, and then it was like funny because no one really knew the rules for replacing a boundary umpire, so we actually thought that David Roden was going to give it a shot. But apparently they just run with one less umpire. So shout outs to the other one that was just running the whole length of the wing on their own. Um, so there was some weirdness in this game, but I don't think it was because there was one
No,
umpire
it
short.
was very much more the field umpires, not the boundary umpires.
Yeah. But yeah, let's get on to this. Officially name it. We are talking about Hawthorn and Sons at Launceston and Blasey. It's not too much of a surprise. We mentioned it last week. It's very hard to beat the Hawks in Tassie.
It is. And like even though, down in Tassie this game wasn't actually that bad in terms of weather, Hawthorn are just way too good down in Tassie. And I think that when the Devils come in, it's gonna make for a very, very fun contest of games. But with a 49-point margin, Hawthorn did win out 16-16, 112 to 9-9-63.
Yeah, and look, as I said, like when we say the weather wasn't too bad, it was still a win ball, but it wasn't as like where some of them are like 5 wins. I would say this is probably equivalent of like 5 meters onto a kick if you were like really trying to launch it. Yeah, nice. But yeah, it was pretty. Honestly, it was a very insipid first half display for the Suns. And not even some what I thought were good adjustments in the third quarter would prevent this game just being comfortably won by extremely stout Hawks defense that have occasionally shown some pretty huge improvements in the center square works and look like I would say complete package, like as complete as you can get. We're talking about Sydney, who probably look more impressive just due to some of the blowouts. But I think when you look at like evenness in player, maybe not player ratings, but like impact around the grounds. There's a lot to like about Hawthorn. I think they deserve to be talked about in the upper echelon of football being played in this first quarter. I will say, as I said, it was very weird. Like Hawthorn kicked some really nice goals against the wind and was pretty good. And you think, oh, they're just going to blow out the Suns because they get the win in the second quarter. And then the Suns randomly get like 4 in a row, I think it was, near the end against the wind. And I was like, oh, this is really good. The Suns, after being absolutely spanked in the clearances, like it was a dismal performance. Once they actually put in a bit of effort, not saying that they weren't trying, but their shape and whatever, it started limiting. They actually, did pretty decently, at least for like half a quarter, and then the Hawks just dominated. Again, still very good on the outside. And yeah, as I said, it was just their midfield. They really just did not click all game. Rao, I think, probably near bottom 10 of his career.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's exactly true. Rule out all the injury games, but like, I hadn't seen him play that bad with only, maybe minor injuries wrong with him. Anderson was only really started in the first half and smashed by Newcomb, and Petrarca was pretty much the opposite, only really starting to play when the game was starting to be lost. As I said, the win really helped Hawthorn's style of football because, as I said, long, straightforward, good territory wins. But in, the opposite side, like Gold Coast were moving the ball, but they couldn't get it past the tall timber of Battle and Scrimshaw. They got a lot of the intercepts. While very deep, Barris just kept King very reasonable. The ball couldn't even get deep half the time. I think Battle and Scrimshaw did a good job of intercepting early as well, like a lot of the ones on the 50. Prevented a few entries as well, which is why I think Hawks had I think it was like near a 20-odd inside 50 differential or something pretty significant. Oh, no, sorry, no. The Suns actually had more inside 50s. So I think, yeah, the Suns had more inside 50s, but they weren't very deep, which is, I think, I was trying to say.
Yeah.
So yeah, as I said, so there wasn't much influence from King. Even Long had to get some very the only time he got his hands on the ball was high up. So as there was a very astute plan by Hawthorn. As I said, Gold Coast good kicking actually kept them in through it. Their set shots I think were near flawless. But I think it was just their general play shots. But yeah, so collapse in effort. Hawks get to bolster their belief as a contender. Well, I think there are some flags being waved at the sun, and it is as red as their logo. With the outlook being more suspect, with their only big win coming from the sometimes terrible, sometimes excellent Geelong. In a sometimes terrible week.
Yes. It is very interesting to see the Hawthorn go on this run because of the fact that they have been tested. Granted, minor injuries did play part in those games where they were tested. But the fact that they have been able to stand tall, kind of really play an adaptive style, when it came to second half momentum shifts, and really, really kind of put themselves in a prime position for an actual solid second half to finals tilt. There's not really all that much that has been able to stop them at the moment. And when there has been something that can stop them, whether it's a shutdown to Newcombe, whether it's a shutdown to Ginnivan, whether it's quote unquote flooding in the back line in their forward line to stop Gunston having an effect, or their tolls having an effect, they've been able. Sam Mitchell and his coaching staff have been able to adapt really, really well on the fly, and completely change the way this team presents themselves in terms of midfield and forward. Their backline is very rarely changed because there's such a solid core already. You've got such insane talent down there, and considering they played this game without Sicily and still had such a dominant performance as well, shows that one, the recruitment of Barras and Battle, fantastic. That's one of the biggest decisions that they could have made.
A couple of no-brainers, but the fact that they've been able to keep shape whilst adding them in, which was the big question mark.
That was the big question.
So what we're talking about, Kernroe with Sydney.
Yeah, exactly right. The fact that they just molded really well into this core, and have just been able to have their own individual impacts. Again, they both had all Australian seasons last year, which is also just very much insane. And I'm looking at their run of the next 4 weeks, and they're all very winnable games, even though they are games that they will be challenged the most. So they've got Collingwood this week. They should probably win that. But then they've got Freo, Melbourne, and the Crows.
Yeah. Okay.
So
it's a good previous self-run.
So if Hawthorn are really gonna make a stamp of being one of the best teams in the league right now, they could very much prove it in the next 4 weeks.
That would set them up for top 4 if they only lost, or even losing one game, but going clear, I would almost guarantee it at that point.
Exactly. They are
like what you're saying.
They're in a very prime position right now to make a huge stamp on this game, and really kind of just make this season so much more interesting, because the top 4 to top 6 are all so close in terms of how they all function and just how talented they all are, and how they and just what they present to the wider league in terms of output it's really interesting to watch so far this season.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, it's just so, because obviously I think the teams on 24 have by far and away been the most consistent. You can't really fault them for anything. Below that is a bit of a logjam though. I'm not saying other teams can't get up to that zone where they are, but it gets harder as the season goes on. As we tend to see, a lot of the top 4. I know last year was a bit of a difference because that swung a lot. It tends to stay the same, from halfway to the season till the end, with the exception of maybe being 4th and 3rd, getting a bit changed up, maybe the order too. But yeah, as I said, so, you generally want to be in the top 4 and midway. You're always setting up for a good season. And, as I said, there's no real reason why I don't think Hawthorn would be there. I think the biggest shame is for the Suns, though, as I said, is just the fact that, they haven't really been tested in terms of depth. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, they had some midfield complications. They had to shuffle out too many players, but like week in, week out, they're playing pretty much their best players and all that sort of thing. And, as I said, for me, it's been a bit concerning that they haven't been, if this was like a, one-off sort of game, you'd understand or whatever. But like, as I said, their midfield for 3 weeks, for the talent they have, should really be putting a tiny bit better results. As I said, when you compare it to Melbourne, what they've been able to do, you do actually have to question their overall shape.
I think,
especially
I
inside
think
to
it's
outside.
very much a systematic issue where I feel like Raul is being played slightly out of position purely for the fact that him and Petrarca play very similar roles. Whereas I feel like if you change it up slightly, put Raul back in where he was last year, play Petrarca more as like a floating forward, and that way you can still have Miller, you can still have Anderson, you can still have whoever else is kind of in that midfield rotation.
Oh, Powell or whatever.
Yeah,
Wasn't that game, but yeah,
and
Graham, Humphrey.
Like, because realistically, you have like he's a contested ball winner, he's a clearance winner, but he's also your best tackler, Matt Rowell. That's why he won the Brownlow, is for those areas. You put him back in that position and let him do what he does best, and you just kind of have to build that around him rather than trying to rotate him elsewhere.
Well, he still is like predominantly in the middle. Like I said, he's
I'm not saying
that game
like
he was at.
I'm not saying like
86.
he's being shuffled into the forward.
Yeah, I know what you mean though, but like. As I said, it was almost a problem like that in 2024 where they were playing Flanders, Anderson, Rowell, and it just didn't really seem to have much connection between their forward line and their midfield. And that's not the problem, like in this one. This is almost the opposite, whereas like their forward line connection is pretty good, but they've almost swung too much in that way to where now the defensive connection just isn't quite there. And, you do actually have to say it's like, well, like Will Powell, like he's not the flashiest player, but he's somewhat decent at some of the defensive efforts. We've seen Alex Davies, try to make it in that midfield. I'm not saying he's the best player going around, but he is a somewhat defensively built, frame. He's a bit sturdier and all that. As I said, I just think like, Christian Petrarca, you can't really be expecting because he's always been like a forward-based player. He's had other players.
He's always been a
defensive.
mid-forward kind of player. That's just how he's been. Yeah.
So it's just like and it depends too because they might only be like saying, "Oh, Matt Rowell, we don't want you to play too defensive because you're nursing a bit of an injury. We want you to work back into it." And maybe he does play the rest of the year a bit more defensively. But yeah, so they just need a bit of a change up in structure because as I said, it was it wasn't just that, it was the Essendon game, it was the Sydney game, it was the Melbourne game. Yeah,
it's a very concerning stretch of games for the reigning Brownlow medalist. But I don't think it's the be all and end all for the Suns. I think they will bounce back. We've seen we have kind of theorized that them making finals last year was more just like them getting the monkey off their back more so than anything, and they might just have a slight dip again and then go back up. I still think that they could still make finals, and like there's not really like
I think they will. Yeah,
like a moment of like being like scared that they won't or anything like that. They're just slight rough patch against some of the tougher teams, and it's just minor kinks that they're gonna work through.
Yeah. I think it's just people going a bit over the top saying that they're the best list in the league, which, as I said, like they've still got very patchy depth. Like, Jed Walters is really a player that's becoming a bit of a, dragged on, hasn't really performed. They're obviously working Hugo Hagen, who I actually thought did all right. Yeah. He presented well. He's clearly a bit out of shape.
In almost 600 days. Yeah. He looks all right.
Yeah. Like, he presented well, it's just his ball use, which was a bit off, but you know what I mean, it's whatever. And, as I said, like, other performers that just basically did nothing, like, Jake Rogers, even Jared Witts was awful. He's had one of the worst seasons, or one of the biggest drop-offs I've seen in a player I really rate, which is a bit of a shame. I don't know if he's nursing an injury or it's just, a fluke, but like, as I said, this is a stretch of like, probably since the first round, he hasn't really done much in the ruck. You know, Hawthorn still like juggling a bit. Ned Reeves didn't exactly have the best game. Lloyd Meek was pretty solid. But that's about it. Yeah, so as I said, yeah, like Gold Coast, they have some stuff to figure out. As I said, like positive sides, like Mac Andrews is probably having the best season of his career. Yeah.
Well, you better hope so, considering how much money they're paying him.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I was always a bit skeptical on that. It's just like, again, it's one of those things where, like, Gold Coast now clearly have a bit of a defensive problem. And the problem with Mac Andrews is, like, I think that to play him at his best, you don't really worry too much about some of his defensive efforts. You build up other players around him, which is fine. But as I said, because it's coming from stoppage, and I think I mentioned this the last couple of weeks, it doesn't really suit the way that Gold Coast like to play. Like, they're good at stopping general transition. Obviously, Hawthorn just had the skill to break through them a lot of the time. But, like, yeah, as I said, once from stoppage, they're not the fastest team in the back line.
Mm-hmm.
Their ground level presence is a bit, I will say that comes from a bit of, Rioli. Obviously, they didn't have, no, they did have Noble.
Yeah, Noble
I
was
think
in.
Noble's been pretty good in that role, but yeah, so they just don't have much ground presence in the back 50. So, compared to Hawthorn, who are really tall and still manage to collect decent enough. So
Yeah, it's interesting to see the kind of the two different paths that these two teams are on this early on in the season. But speaking of different paths, we're going to jump over to two teams who are very traditional in their ways, especially when it comes to marquee games, because it is the traditional NZ Day clash between the Bombers and the Magpies. And it's interesting to not. I want to say that the scoreline doesn't really tell the whole story, but it kind of does in this one. But it's mostly in that second half. But with a 77-point margin, the Magpies do win out. 2017, 137 to 9660.
Yeah, it's like Essendon's score of 9-6 is like pretty reflective of where they're at. It's just, the 2017 just came from, team getting a bit tired, really. It was pretty decent arm wrestle when Essendon could put pressure on the Pies. Like, when Essendon are able to force the game into a contest, they do pretty well. But as I said, the territory dominance scene went to score dominance. We've talked about the Magpies not always being lethal, and it was definitely the case in the first half. But they get a bit more space, and we've always talked about the Magpies. Once they're able to pick off turnovers, they turn it into a really strong attack, and that's sort of where it broke down for Essendon. Possession for the Dons, mainly at halfbacks. Archie Roberts, did well enough with ball in hand. But, as I said, I think the 42 disposals by him was a bit more concern than pure celebration. Not saying that he did a bad job. I'm very impressed with what he did. A few players even, was like, oh, he's a top 3 player on the ground. Slightly disagree with, but, as I said, still an honest knock in a pretty,
He was
performance.
Definitely one of the big standout players for the Bombers. Again, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Like, 42 disposals when the ball is constantly in your defensive 50. It is a bit of a stat patter kind of number, but I think what he did with a lot of those disposals was fairly decent.
Yeah, so anyway, but on the flip side, some Collingwood domination in the centre square especially after halftime, with Anzac medalist Scott, same disposals as his age, Pendlebury. Not literally, but like close enough with 40, was it 43, 44?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Dacos feasted, even though his ball use was pretty much terrible. Josh Dacos also featured. And Cameron and Steen absolutely, had very serviceable games, I would say. Like, they weren't like flashy in terms of like doing stuff on ground level, but I think that's only because it was just so easy for them to actually tap it to their mids without too much genuine opposition in the ruck.
Yeah.
Gus Anderson, Ryan Steele, I think, again, like I talk about Collingwood the same way I talk about Melbourne is like they're old, but they're wanting to introduce some young players. And I think both of them had really good games. Gus Anderson, like a really good, is it 3-game stretch now?
Yeah, I believe
Really
this is
solid.
his third game.
Yeah. And on the flip side, Day Wicks and El Hawley were pretty solid with their impact early with the game on the line. So, still good sides for Essendon. There's not really much I want to say about like the system of this game. Like I said, this is just like Collingwood having a chance to be a bit more impactful with ball in hand. But, there's still a slight concern that they took them so long. You got to give Essendon some credit. Like, as I said, it's not that Essendon are bad, and, we've talked about it at length this year, where Essendon, it's sort of good and bad, is like, they get smashed on the outside, but they at least have an avenue of winning when they can get the ball to ground.
Yeah, I think a
Which,
lot of their younger players are really showing positive signs in their system, and
yeah.
I think that's why, like players like McGrath, Merritt are like starting to really back these players in and like have a really start developing a really solid support network around them, especially when you have to deal with a lot of these kinds of losses.
Yeah.
It was good. It's been good to see Dersma play some decent games. It's good to see Darcy Parish back in playing consistently. But there's definitely still like some players in this side. One being a Ben Mackay, who's kind of just making a lot of money for not doing very much in that back line.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is what it is. I will say the other thing that I think hurts Essendon, and I've like alluded to a few times, is like, they're like lowish. They're in like bottom 6 in terms of like kick percentage. In terms of like how many disposals, what percentage of disposal are kicks versus handballs.
Yeah.
But I think one of the biggest problem is again, there's just too many chains that end up with a player that's a bit younger, a bit more inexperienced, being forced to make a rush possession because they've just sort of been forced into the chain.
Yeah.
Which can happen with contested teams. Like, again, sometimes it's the players themselves, like, not shaping themselves on the outside enough. But I do think it's sometimes, a bit of a knock on. And as, I'll say it, like, I think McGrath had a pretty fine game, but I think that's, like, something he could probably work on. Like I said, it makes him look good because it's like, oh, it's a handball and it goes to a player, it's not turned over. But if it just ends up dead, it's not really helping the team much.
Yeah. Great.
So, it's just like a little thing that he could work on. But, it's pretty universal.
Yeah, it is kind of
Yeah,
it
as I
is
said,
very
it's
much
just
like a stock standard kind of issue that a lot of these younger teams deal with. Is that like they create these handball chains and like for the most part it's decent until you come to a point where you somehow end up in the middle of traffic with an inexperienced player ball in hand, and they kind of just panic and don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, it's because you can still play the other way, which is just like kick it long, always force a constant, which can be pretty negative. So it's a sliding scale. But as I said, I just think that sometimes it's causing, well, not too much chaos, but you know what I mean. It's preventing a lot of these younger players from, always having an impact because again, they lose confidence, obviously, because their ball use just skyrockets down. And, they end up being very up and down. And, as I said, and then you could go, oh, well, you got Zach Merritt and Andrew McGrath. They've done all right, but all the kids are struggling. And it's like, well, as I said, and it's not like a huge knock because it's very hard to do that. I think Zach Merritt still does a reasonable job. But like, as I said, like if you look, there's a stat that's, like meters gained, but also assisted meters, which is like how much your disposal has caused another player to run on. And, as I said, you look at this game and it's quite clear to see like Scott Pendlebury, 386 meters, 600 assisted meters. So, obviously take that. He's added almost double his meterage by letting another player run. Whereas Archie Roberts, just to put an example, 707 meters gained, but 518 assisted meters. So a lot of his disposals is, of course, negative play.
Yeah.
So, not saying be all end all, it's not just as simple as like plussing and minusing it all. But, it is a good indication on like whether players are able to create space or not. Which, yeah, as I said, Essendon just struggled to.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that a young, inexperienced team will eventually learn and eventually adapt to. I do commend Brad Scott for like really sticking with that idea of like, this is my core. These are the players that I want to get the most sort of game time and consistency into. And I'm only going to make very minor changes. Never going to be a big sweeping of the axe kind of thing. And because that's the kind of, unless you get hampered by injuries, that's, I feel like, the kind of mentality you need to go into with a young team.
Yeah.
Because it's the only way they're
going
to be able to
last
get.
Year.
Yeah, it very much is different from last year. Because it's
where
the only way you're going to get
had a few too many players. Yeah, that were just like a bit older and not contributing. Like they have sacrificed a lot to play young, and when you do that, you have to back them in a fair bit. And as I said, it is brave coaching. Like, it doesn't look good on you when you are forced to play such a young team. It does mean
that there is a fair chance, again, you're going to get decimated by quite a few teams. Yeah. West Coast are very much still in that sort of space of getting hampered most weeks. But, if you keep that consistency up, let the team gel more, develop that trust with each other a lot more, that's how you get more consistent footy, how you develop these skills a lot better, especially with your leaders constantly on field as well, and that's eventually they will start to, get more than just that one win on the board. When Dreamtime comes around, potential chance they can get one there against Richmond. When they come up against West Coast, when they come up against North, if they haven't already, there are potential wins there as well. Even a clash against a team like St Kilda, who are very, very inconsistent, as we all know, could be a surprise there. Same coming up against a second round against the Blues. There are definitely opportunities for them to find wins throughout the season, as long as they're able to keep with this consistency, keep this development process going, and you will be rewarded for it in time.
Yeah, and as I said, it is about like just knowing when some matchups are probably a bit too outside of your list, which I think the Collingwood matchup is. Like, Collingwood aren't the greatest team going around. They're making a few changes, but like, again, they're just going to get beaten by a lot of the outside moving teams. But, to finish it up with Essendon, and I do want to make this point because I found this a bit interesting. Because I knew, like, Essendon have a scoring shot issue. Like, that's the biggest flaw of Essendon, is they don't get the ball inside 50 enough. And it means that they just have limited scores per matches. But it's a shame, but also a good thing that their 12 goals per game is actually pretty high. And if you believe it, they have the third highest goals per inside 50 for all the clubs so far this season. So what is this very similar to? This is very similar to 2024 North, before they found more inside 50. And it does bode well for the future. But again, like as we were saying before, it does put the pressure on the mids to find a way to win territory.
Yes.
As I said, I do think it's a chain issue. I've already laboured that point now. And it is a 3-year problem for the Dons as well. Like, this has been the last 3 years, so it's a known issue. The fact that they just don't get much territory. Again, always be a bit affected by ball use playing such a young team. But, unlike Melbourne and, maybe now Port, as I said, it's just the inability to alleviate pressure that hold them back and causes these blowout games. So, again, is what it is, but at least functionality-wise, like, there's a bit of structure there.
Yeah.
It's not
like they
enough for this season, but for the future.
They're developing a decent core, and, like, that's, really commendable. It just goes back to what I was talking about just before. It's just, finding... They just need to either try and find some key trades in the off-season or, continue to go into the draft and just start finding players to kind of replace some key positions that are very much lacking at this point in time. Like, the forward line definitely needs a lot of work. 2-meter Peter can't be doing both rucking and forward crafting right now.
Yeah.
Even though, there's potential for Nick Bryan to come back and like get that game time as a ruck back in.
Oh, we hope.
But yeah, they definitely
Might
need
be next week.
potentially next week. That's true. He should be. I believe he played VFL over the weekend, so there's a potential
Yeah.
chance of him to return.
And changes a lot. It means Blackiston plays defense and can only, come in and switch, and obviously Peter just plays full key forward.
Yeah, especially when you look at just a player like Kyle Langford for an example. It's like he did some fairly decent presenting in this game, but he's still very much not there with his conversion rate and other works around the ground, which is where an area that the Bombers need to start investing more into for their forward line.
Yeah, it's just so funny. It's like as contested as their inside midfield is, their outside is like very uncontested.
Oh, yeah.
I guess they do not stop movement at all. So as I said, it's a big shift. And as I said, that's why I'm talking about when I'm saying like, oh, they need to bring the ball to ground because they get smashed in marking differentials.
Very much so. However, it's the more pain for the next couple of weeks for the Bombers because Archer May has gone out with a knee injury. It's not an ACL, thankfully. I believe it might be an MCL or like just a minor sort of injury. So he'll be out for a while anyway. And Isaac Keiko is out with a minor back strain. That may only be a couple of weeks, hopefully. Fingers are crossed that he will be okay from that recovery because back injuries are always very, very like hit and miss in terms of recovery rates.
Complicated, yeah.
Yeah.
So they can stretch out.
They can. So hopefully, positive news in the next couple of weeks from Keiko, and he'll be able to come back for like Dreamtime, for an example, because I think that would be a really cool experience for him. Jumping over now to our next Saturday game, over to the Adelaide Oval, and I already see the little smirk on your face about this one because it's one of the very few occasions of this year where Port got the surprising upset. With a 30-point margin, the Power win out against Geelong, 13-17-95 to 10-5-65.
Yeah, and it's sort of been building up a tiny bit because as I said, like, the first quarter against St Kilda, pretty bad, but like every quarter after that, and including this game, has had a lot of upside. Obviously, is when the Port got smacked in the middle early in that game against Hawthorn, set them back a bit. But even in that quarter, they brought it back. So, it's quarters, and I said the only loss in this game was pretty much in the accuracy department, because Port absolutely spanked Geelong. There's no real other way to say it. It looked bad early. Port couldn't convert from their early territory dominance, as Geelong went 4 goals straight. They would kick 7 straight, but 2 out of bounds, or short from set shot. So pretty much unblemished. And it looked like Cameron and Neil would have absolutely huge days. As I said, they didn't. Not that the matchups were that bad, but as I said, the efficiency when they had a bit of time and space going into their forward half, they just look a step above. Port's defense needs a bit of protecting, and what happened was probably one of the best front half presses I've seen in a long time. Not just from Port, who sort of base their play around that under Hinkley, especially in the mid to late 2000s. 2010s, I should say. And it just neutered the Cats, and it neutered their run and carry. They had almost no back half movements, a lot of forward 50 turnovers from Port Adelaide. And, as I said, it just led Port to have a stoppage and marking dominance. And their attacking ball use actually gets them a bit deeper and more threatening inside 50 now, especially since they've limited back half turnovers as well. That in general has just allowed pressure to build up. As I said, early in the season, like I think I mentioned this before, like I hadn't really thought that Port were playing with a lack of energy or a lack of good ideas. I think maybe their forward line entries in the first couple of games were pretty bad. But apart from that, it was just turning the ball over, giving the opposition too much easy score. But they've limited that a bit, and they look much more threatening. In terms of the individual performance, Sweet absolutely dominated the ruck. Poor young Edwards had no support. Blitclaft's getting injured early after his big game. I think that was more precautionary. Zach Butters sort of ran into it, sort of maybe bruised his quad. I would say. Um, but it's said knee, so yeah, I said it was just some sort of. It was more light contact damage more than anything. So hopefully he'll be fine. And Edwards, I think, also had a bit of a knock, so he was, again, like the title, uphill battle for a young ruck.
This one was very much an uphill
Brave,
battle, yeah.
but yeah, brave but not fruitful performance, pretty much. And yeah, Horn Francis was absolutely electric. And I know you didn't get to watch this game, but yeah, as I said, this was one of the most pleasant surprises, and it was good to get all the other fan bases because, like, Port haven't been the most likable team, I would say, even under Hinkley. Like, the media like him, and I think that sort of like soured their reception. But everyone's like hatred or like randomly, like when Geelong just stuff up, like they just came together, and it was a pretty fun game. I had a very fun time watching this. I was one of those ones where I struggled to contain my energy.
Looking back at it, when I was going through like the match report and stuff, it did really feel like a really fun kind of game to watch.
Yeah.
Especially not purely for the fact that it swung in Port's favor, and because it's always nice to see Geelong actually lose. It's more so the fact that like there were like from what I could read and see at the highlights, it was very like key little moments in this game that are what create that excitement, and they're from the exciting players as well. It's from your Butters, your Horn Francises. Whenever the ball went up forward, you had Georgiades doing some decent work. When the ball went back, you had Aaliyah doing some fantastic work, BZT doing some fantastic work. Your players that needed to stand up stood up.
Yeah.
And that's what makes the game so much more entertaining.
Also, I will say, just because I want to give him some props, you mean Lockie Jones.
Yes, sorry, I didn't mean Lockie Jones. They for some reason in my head, they look so similar. Yeah.
Yeah, if you gave BZT a mullet, I think he would look like Lockie Jones. But yeah, he had a pretty great game. I think he was on Shannon Neal. And like the couple of goals that Shannon Neal, like it was some nice contested work. You got to give him props. But overall, he was pretty limited. I think he did better out the ruck. I think one of his goals came from a ruck contest too. So can't really blame Jones for that. Otherwise, yeah. No, you're right. And I think even like the, younger players, I think McKinlay, maybe not fully consistent, but definitely had some more positive moments. Josh Lai, I love this kid.
He's had a very,
and I think he's changed a lot of our structure.
Very standout month of games, I think.
Yeah, because it's not just his ability to be a decent mix of like defensive effort and ball use. He's also a pretty good interceptor. As I said, he's not going to get as many as like, Aaliyah on a good day or, whatever. But like, again, when you talk about like a forward half press, he actually positions himself, which in a way that I think we've asked like Bergman to do before.
Mm-hmm.
And like Bergman is still in a bit of ether. I think he played a lot better game today. Oh, sorry, on Saturday. But you know what I mean? It was just like we asked him to do a lot. So to have another player that can like play a very set role, take some pressure on some other players, and I think we've seen a flow-on effect. I think Lockie Evans has been playing better since he's come on in. I thought he could have been dropped earlier in the season, and now he's doing some pretty decent roles. Darcy Byrne-Jones as well. Talking about, flow-on effects. Him being able to play in the back half. Like, I like him. He's a very big trier in the forward line. But, I was going to say Corey Durden and, where's this? The other one. The one we got from Collingwood. Joe Richards.
Oh, yes.
So much more offensive return from their disposals. So that was really good.
I think Durden, whilst he had a decent role at Carlton, I think he's going to end up being a little bit of an unsung pickup for Port Adelaide in due time, because we've seen his upside, and it's exactly what like Port really need offensively. So if we're able to, if Port are able to get more consistency out of him like that, I think he'll like very much be like a sneaky kind of standout player.
Yeah, and I think what hurt for him in Carlton, especially when they still had both Curnow and Mackay, is that he does play a bit like traditional. Like he is definitely like that forward. He's not like a Joe Richards who really likes to push up. He's like, okay, I'll be leading, but then my forward leading patterns turns into forward half pressure, and sort of does both. So he's definitely in and out, and it definitely benefits because, as I said, I think Richards does his best work as like a wing high half forward.
Mm-hmm.
And Berry, as I said, he's a bit, you know, he's young. He's a bit of an X Factor player. And we've even chucked him in the centre bounce occasionally, which has been interesting. So, as I said, I think his role is becoming less about scoreboard impact. I thought he was going to be like a deep, small forward. But I think we've put him a bit higher on the ground. I think it's helped his output. Maybe get some confidence back in his game. So, yeah, it's pretty good. In terms of what I've actually written, because I've just been gushing about players. I mentioned before, like the last 9 quarters of football, I think has been really good. I do think, like, to rein this back a bit, I do think, sort of like what I mentioned about the Suns before, I find that Port find it hard to defend from centre bounce on stoppage losses. But again, they're one of the best teams defending the ball from their forward half / the opposition's back half. As I said, it was easy to see how little run and carry Geelong got from their disposals compared to the norm. And, as I said, it's, while I don't think Port are going to be the perfect team, like it might be fun to say, oh, they're going to like storm back, like Josh Carr's got them going and they're going to be like a really good team now. I do think they have some issues, and it is mainly to do with their back line, partially their midfield, even partially their forward line. Like they have a lot of inside 50s with pretty bad conversion as well. But structurally, there's a lot to like about it. And you can see their game plan now, and it's converting to tangible results, which is all you can ask.
Yeah, it's exactly what you can ask for. Like, especially when you know for a fact that like this team is very much in a weird position where you're transitioning to new coach, new game plan.
Yeah.
Semi rebuild, even though that's not really like outwardly mentioned as such. And just like if you're able to still get the results that you kind of should have expected, or should have had last year, that still puts you in a pretty solid position.
Yeah, and it's like, you talk about rebuild, it's like Port, their average age was 25, their experience age was 80. That's almost on par with Essendon. I know Essendon have a few outliers and all that. In fact, it was tied with Richmond in terms of average age. So, you know what I mean? It's like, whether you call it a rebuild or not, they're playing some young players. They're going to have to build around some young players. That just is what it is, especially with a few injuries. But, to be able to get some output this early, and they haven't even gotten thrashed this year, which I think is a positive sign. Like, yeah, the North game, they had a lot of turnovers. I'd say that was like a dominant performance by North. But, as I said, like everything else is like at least being respectable, even the West Coast loss, which, still hurt, but it is what it is. So yeah, as I said, it's one of those things where you can't really be too upset about it. But, I'm still a bit realistic. I think there'll be some swings and roundabouts. But, yeah, talking about Geelong as well, just to mention it, because I do think it's worth mentioning, because I don't think they're in a bit of strife or whatever. But Geelong, we know them. They can be a very stubborn team. And I think back of like 2021, the year before they win their premiership, when they had that old and slow tag to them, where they were based a lot of back half intercepts and then playing very slowly off them, sort of like Collingwood sometimes do. And where their only fast players was like, Isaac Smith and Gary Rowan on the wing. You know what I mean? Like, it's a lot different to what they have now. So, as I said, they can be a bit stubborn. They like to play the same style. But there is an inkling that maybe if you reduce the run, which is hard to do, it is a flow-on effect because, again, you limit their run, you limit their ability to hit long targets because, again, from speed, they like to create chaos in opposition defense. And once that happens, you severely limit their meterage because they're not the best ball winning team. So in this year, Gold Coast sort of accidentally did it by dominating the stoppages in round 0.
Yep.
Both teams are raw. Geelong had a lot of turnovers. And Port did it by dominating these outside contests and employing a front half press, which we haven't seen too many teams employ this year. So while it's not too much of a strife, again, this is sort of like if Geelong don't do something about this, it could hurt. Because good teams will see these sort of things. And they're like, in finals, we might try doing these small things, destroying their confidence early and belting teams. That's why you see a lot of belting.
I guarantee you teams...
Like, good teams just suddenly seem shit.
I guarantee you coaching staff from, like, Hawthorn, from Brisbane, from Sydney, all looked at this game and watched how Port shut down Geelong's movement, because that's where Geelong is most threatening. You're right, because those long kicks tend to go to their tall targets, whether it's whether it's Shannon Neal, whether it's Jeremy Cameron, even someone like an Ollie Dempsey who can play tall, Sam de Koning when he's in, if he happens to float forward, you know, like that's,
or even just giving their
danger.
distributors time and space.
Yeah, exactly, you know? Right.
Like, I think that is the one knock on Geelong this year, is I don't think, and it's been partially due to Grime-Eyes injury and Brad Cross maybe dropping off a bit of form, is that their link up between half forward and forward, like, isn't as ridiculously good as it was in, like, 2024, 2025.
Yeah, so, it definitely feels like there has been a slight drop-off. Part of that is due to Grime-Eyes not being consistently out there, because he is one of their bigger ball distributors on those wings, alongside Bailey Smith.
Yeah.
So that's... it's definitely, a part where they have lacked a little bit, and Port took advantage of that. But 100%, like the top end teams are going to be looking at this very closely, because I think one of them is facing Geelong in the next couple of weeks. So that'll be a very interesting matchup to come. Over on the injury side of things, we have touched on Mark Blitzarves and his knee concern. That bump is a little bit of... It's not innocuous because it was player on player related, but there's nothing in it, no malice or anything like that, nothing reported.
Oh, no.
So hopefully he won't actually be out for too long, because they definitely need him. Otherwise, I have to go back to Reece Stanley being a rock. Otherwise, Sam de Koning was managed and a late change. He should be back in this week's game. And Todd Marshall for Port Adelaide was out with an illness, also a late change. Will likely be back in this week.
Yeah. I forgot actually who came in for Marshall. Oh, it was Jack Watkins, who played the Sandville and only played like a quarter of the game. Honestly, he did have a bad game. Like, he had a few disposals here and there for playing a game beforehand. Yeah, that was all right.
All right.
Yeah, shall we go on to and it was weird. It's like interesting. It was a very mixed game.
This one was very much a very mixed game. Jumping over to Western Australia now, where Fremantle hosted Carlton, and with a 14-point margin, Freo did win out 16-7, 103 to 13-11, 89. But I don't think the scoreline tells the entirety of this story, especially in that fourth quarter, because it looks like Carlton are finally starting to get over their fourth quarter woes.
Yeah, well, it's so weird. Like, it's a game that felt like Freo both comfortably won. Obviously, they had that big surge in the fourth quarter. But yet Carlton was so much more, because a few people were calling it junk time. But, like, when you look at it, like, Carlton had a lot of good general play. And, you know, as I said, Fremantle dominated with their forwards and, you know, displayed great marking and distribution inside 50. But again, and it's always the case with Freo, their conversion, it's almost sickening. You know what I mean? Like, they just get a lot better output than what their general play suggests, because they're just an okay ball movement team. But once I get inside 50, they absolutely destroy. But, you know, as the Carlton did, like, the minor things, so, like, they forced them to wide shots. They pushed them up the ground. The defense was relatively okay for, again, being outsized, outmatched, whatever. But yeah, as I said, it was just, you know, solid set shot shooting that made Dockers look like on another level, but I don't think Carlton were bad. As I said, normally they're lackluster in preventing opposition movement, but I actually think that Carlton were, pretty solid.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was sort of just a dominance in stoppages, which they don't always lose. It was sort of the inverse of Carlton, which led to Shai Bolton being fed. And Shai Bolton was feasting that match. It was one of the, he's had a real, he's all Australian for sure. So far anyway.
He won the match medal for a reason. This was an outstanding game for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, Jason Horn-Francis, he won.
Yes.
Because all the
Anzac
games have a medal.
Yes, they did.
Attached to it.
And we should also probably mention. I don't know if the Hawthorn game did. I think they did, but I got no idea. Off the top of my head, at least.
Yeah.
But we should also probably mention that Quasi Pickett won the Checkers medal in the Richmond Melbourne game too.
Right. Yeah, well, honestly, I think we just assumed it the way we were talking about it.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
I probably just forgot.
It's also very glamorized that Pendle's won that one, so that's fair enough.
Yeah. Anyway, so Cripps and Walsh, I thought were fairly solid again. But again, Cullen's offense from clearance never quite offsets their lack of defense from clearance, and it was a hole that exposed that let Freo tear the game. But, as I said, some of the work by Jackson, Brayshaw, Young, was going to be hard to defend anyway. Freo seemed fairly on song. As I said, technically, Freo always seem I watch it, and it's theoretically, you should have more holes. But, it's a French Longmuir. If it was just, games here and there and, they were dropping it, I would be a bit more critical. But because they haven't, you got to give it to them. And they're just clearly one of the best performing teams at the moment. I'll give it another shout out. I also didn't watch this game, so I won't go into too detailed notes. Honestly, once Port won, I was sort of done with football for the day. I was this is as happy a conclusion I'm gonna get from watching football. So I sort of just dipped away at halftime. Also, I think Freo was starting to dominate by the time I got to watching it, so I was just they should win. Yeah, but Reedy performed very well against his old side. But it was very clear to see why Dockers didn't need the Reed, as Cox was a great backup ruck, filling in for Patrick Voss. He was filling in for, what do you call being out? Sean Darcy.
Yes, he was covering Sean Darcy. Sean Darcy being out with a minor injury. Still, it was the same sort of one that kind of played him last week, and why he was also out there. Actually, genuinely seeing Mason Cox kind of present really well, compete really well in ruck contests, even be able to rotate forward to cover Pat Voss in terms of that third tall department. Fantastic work.
Honestly, Pat Voss has only had a couple of 2-goal games this season. Yeah, that's true.
So... He hasn't exactly had the best of seasons compared to last season so far anyway.
Yeah.
But the secondary fact is that Jai Amos has, I know we talked about him over the past couple of weeks, but he's continuing to improve and really start to present more as a definitive tall forward. And it's been so good to see him really develop in the past month or so of this season, because it's really starting to kind of show, I guess, the rest of the AFL world why Freo have stuck with him for so long, for being such a young tall. And, they're now starting to get the results that they want out of him. And it's been, he combines really well with Tracy. Obviously, he works really well with Voss. And now with knowing that Mason Cox can float down there, they combine really well there as well. It's been a really solid... it's been really good to see this development process finally start to flourish for him.
Yeah, because as I said, I can't remember if it was this year or late last year. I was on board with dropping Amos, at least for a game, get his confidence back. But again, that's why I'm not a coach, is because if you trust the coaching system enough, you know how to get players ready and whatever. Sometimes you just don't need to, and clearly whatever they've done, whether it's just being young Jai. You're a forward. Sometimes key forwards start the season slow. Just keep on believing in yourself, and he's been able to figure out whatever it was.
Mm.
I do want to say some individual efforts for Carlton too, as well, that I didn't mention before. I'm not sure why. Cottrell, he's
Yes.
back. That's sort of a nice little story out of it all. And
Cottrell
I didn't even write it.
was a late change. He did cover Ollie Hollands,
Yeah,
who was managed. I assumed that was more of a personal
yeah,
reason, managed because of his brother going through the mental
yeah,
health things. But it was really good to see Cottrell back in and actually played fairly solidly, as which is why he's
yeah,
being mentioned, because it's really good. Like even when when he had been in a lot more consistency, he was still fairly consistent. It was just minor injury hampers kind of quelled his season last year. Um,
yeah.
and yeah, it's good to see him straight away come back into some decent form.
Well, it's also one of those big sliding doors things because I think they sort of backed in Cottrell to like shift into other players developing into that high half forward, and that's why they got rid of Matthew Kennedy.
Mm.
But obviously, I still think that's a decision that's hurting him. We're going to talk about it too much though, because Matthew Cottrell was pretty fine. And Brady
Yes.
Kemp, and I guess Mitch McGovern too, acting as decent forwards. I love a good Brady Kemp game because it's so unlikely, and yet sometimes he
He's
just kicks
he's
the bag.
he's just one of those like unlikely players.
Against
And it's
Freo,
always so interesting to kind of see. Yeah,
the best defense in the league right now, probably.
probably.
Uh,
Quote that: the best defense in the league right now, probably Sarek 2026.
but no, it's too early. Yeah, it's too early to really tell. But I would say the Dockers, they're quite good.
They
They're not a
are.
huge territory dominance team. They allow teams enough entries.
Yeah, they give them
So
they
the
give
fact
teams
they defend
plenty of
most of them,
space, but they very
yeah,
much back up their defensive efforts, which is why they're so difficult to play against
yeah,
sometimes.
they put their ball pressure back. Like they're not a high tackling team. They can when they want to. I would say. But yeah, as I said, like Carlton, I actually thought their scoring was pretty impressive as well. Like I said, like as ridiculous as Freo was, like Carlton's scoring conversion, like 13-11, some of the shots they were taking were relatively tough too.
Mm.
It's just like again, 16-7 is just ridiculously good, and 13-11 is just all right.
Yeah, it sounds like prayer. But
Yeah,
yes,
yeah. As I said, they
um,
just get things done.
yeah. On the quote unquote injury side of things, again, Pat Voss was a late out with an illness, and Ollie Hollands was managed. But on the MRO side of things, Caleb Sarong was fined $1,000 for tripping Sam Walsh, and Lockie Cohen was fined $2,000 for rough conduct against Murphy Reed. All right, jumping over now to our Sunday games, starting off at Marvel Stadium, when St Kilda hosted the West Coast Eagles, and with probably the biggest margin game that I think St Kilda has seen in quite a long time, with a 101 point margin. St Kilda did obviously win out 22-11, 143 to 5-12, 42. There's not too much to really say on this one.
Yeah.
It's just the Eagles kind of coming back down from the heavens of their two random wins.
Yeah, well, as I said, I think Eagles fans should be a bit harsher on their team. You know what I mean? Like, I think this is a performance where you've got to have a bit of, maybe not venom, but you know what I mean? You've got to want to get out of your game because, again, there's a statistic is like, Eagles the last 4 years have had more 100-point losses than every other team combined. I think it's like 17-15 or something like that. So, as I said, they beat this team last year. Like, even accounting to like the variabilities and all that, like there should be some, like a lot of people are thinking like, if this was at Optus, like West Coast might be a smoky chance, and they weren't even close.
That's the way I looked at it. If this game was played out west, I think that West Coast definitely had more of a chance. And I think part of that definitely comes down to the fact that Optus is a very different ground dimensionally compared to Marvel. Whereas I think Marvel is a little bit more narrow in the wings. But yeah, here I think St Kilda were always going to have that upper hand, and it very clearly showed.
Yeah, but it was very baffling. Like I said, I don't know whether it was a coaching blunder or like the way that McWalter did or didn't get them set up. But like the Eagles and I don't always mind this, is like the Eagles quite clearly went for the offensive early. Like they pressed very high. They were trying to like force the turnovers, but not force turnovers. Get more return out of their entries, but they were very wasteful going forward. And on the rebound, the Saints just had so much unguarded space once they got that turnovers. It was some of the easiest ball movements you'll see in a game of football. It was like when both the ball carrier and the options forward had no pressure. There was always a loose person. I've written here 37% of defensive half chains went into the forward 50, and the Saints scored 11-4 off them. Not actually the best for the round, mind you, but it was just the lack of effort on the outside. Add to it, the Eagles got comfortably beaten in clearances as well, thoroughly beaten in the air, and it was a thrashing and a half. I know it was theoretically close-ish at halftime, but I really think that was only because the Saints were wasteful.
Yeah.
The only positive I would say out of this is 5-12 scoring shot. 17 scoring shots was actually not too bad.
No, in terms of the scoring shots, it's pretty good. It's more the fact that their conversion rate was not that good.
Yeah, well, as I said, it was again, for the limited-ish inside 50s, it was, okay. Anyway, it's a very raw Eagles side, and the loss of Robertson, which I think has gone very under the radar. I think the team has significantly gotten worse with him out, and obviously one of your former boys, Jack Graham,
yes,
has lost them a lot of toughness in the contest. But yeah, as I said, they weren't going to win the game shape-wise. It was poor. I actually shoot this forward. The only other good things I want to say about the Eagles is that Lindsay, I think, has been absolutely fantastic this year. Continues his good form. And Harley Reid, I think it's the best I've seen him respond to a tag. I've said before that he often gives away stupid free kicks and all that. But, as I said, he tried to be a bit tougher. His disposal wasn't as clean. But again, it wasn't so much, because I have said sometimes he needs to draw players away from the contest. I don't think he actually had a chance this week, so he just sort of outmuscled. And it wasn't that bad an effort. I think he obviously had the what do you call it, Windhager tag. I think that was who was on him. I only watched when it was
I think Windhager was on him.
Tagged by Garcia. Okay.
Actually, speaking of Garcia,
had a very...
I actually wanted to talk about Garcia's stats, because late last year, I think it was, even in our preseason analysis, I very much highlighted Garcia as an important player in terms of what he was able to produce in a handful of games that he was able to play. And he had another monster game this week, 32 disposals, 23 of them effective, 15 contested possessions, 4 intercepts, 3 inside 50s, 9 clearances, 6 of them from center clearance, 2 goals, 9 score involvements, 5 tackles, 26 pressure acts. He's, despite being such a small kind of person in this midfield, he has such a huge impact that allows players like Naz to float more forward. For players like Brad Hill to play a little bit more flexible on the wing, and it allows
Sam Flanders
a little bit more flexibility as well. Windhager to do his tag, to have a little bit more freedom in terms of whether he wants to do a tag, whether he wants to play loose. And even Darcy Wilson, whenever he's able to come in, it does free up a lot of these younger midfield players and give them more opportunities when you have someone that dependent.
Yeah, exactly. As I said, I think he's had a fairly reasonable year. Again, I don't watch the Saints too closely. But or at least this year I haven't. But yeah, as I said, it was just one of those teams that, in some of their wins they haven't looked too bad, and some of the losses, they've looked better than what I've thought. But yeah, this game was just as clear, as I said, it was just a bit baffling because, again, we know the Saints are a very long, direct, high meters gained, very down the line team. And it's just the fact that the Eagles almost did nothing to do it. I get wanting to be offensively based as a young team. And we even saw, like, at the end of Simo's tenure, like, some of the best moments was when they were, like, starting to not focus as much on defending. But there's, like, not focusing on the defense, and then there's being unaccountable. And that was just overall unaccountable, and it was just too much damage.
Yeah, there was
So,
unfortunately a
yeah,
fair bit of that going on.
had to put that game behind him. But yeah, it was nice to see the Saints capitalize. They'll get a nice piece of percentage, and they'll be in the logjam that is the ladder this year.
Yes, yeah, the middle of the pack right now is very congested. We'll take a look at that towards the end of the episode. But we're gonna jump over now to the Gabba, where the reigning premiers hosted the Adelaide Crows. And with a 52-point margin, the Lions did win out 19-13, 127 to 11-9, 75.
And again, the marquee game, what we all thought was going to be, pretty decent, ended up not really being a close contest. But what the fans did see, especially since it was at the Gabba, was the absolute ruthlessness of the Brisbane offense when given a chance. The game was close-ish at halftime, but the scoring rate, I think, for the Lions was always a concern. Like, it was very clear from the outset that Adelaide just couldn't contain it. And on the flip side, it was hard for the Crows to find territory. Again, I was sort of watching this match, but I didn't actually realize it. But then I was looking through, and apparently they got 0 meters gained by hands from 144 5 handballs, which was more than what Brisbane did. And they got, like, I don't know, like 100 odd meters. So, for the Crows, they were just forced backwards. They were playing into the Brisbane bully ball. Brisbane dominated stoppage ground ball, still found out some marking targets and, slowed the game down. Like, this was like when Brisbane looked invincible. And honestly, I don't even think it was that miserable by the Crows. Like, yeah, they were outplayed. Their defense really struggled, but, like, you sometimes expect that from Brisbane. But there are actually signs that their back half movement sort of improved, especially from the start of the year. And Dawson, I think his performance in the circumstances, warrants huge applause.
Yeah,
Like,
great.
he really, for the circumstances, absolutely fantastic. But yeah, as I said, unfortunately for the middle 2 quarters, the ball was just rarely sided deep for the Crows. Their forwards sort of starved. Although I will say, like, this is a very interesting thing, is that Pedler actually becomes a very good scoring option when they are stuck higher up, which is, credit to him. Because, again, he's never really been a player that's on many people's radars. But he's had a couple of good 3-goal, 2 goals performances, especially since Neil Bullen was missing this game.
Yes.
Or at least I think he was.
Yeah, he was. I believe he was out with like a minor injury or like a managed kind of thing this week. It might have been out last week as well. I can't remember. But yeah, he did miss out on this game, which took a little bit out of their strength in
outside
that midfield.
movement.
But
yeah. Which, again, like, as much as, like, we've talked about their outside movement being a lot worse than last year, which is why Adelaide seem good, but they're not quite getting it done. But, as I said, they'll be working to get that back. And at least in this game, it looks solid while still having the injuries that they have in that area. Yeah, as I said, the last thing for Brisbane, just specifically, that isn't just Brisbane being Brisbane. Adding to their strength, which is what we need. Brisbane have been so down for so long. It's good to see them improve. McKenna played his first game in a while, had a nice 2-goal cameo. Gallup in defense took a Texan-sized scalp, absolutely dominating the Tex, who did try to push up occasionally. Did the right thing, but Gallup actually did good in preventing even those disposals from having much impact. And Draper and Fort had excellent synergies. There's signs that McAndrews might need a rest, might need an O'Brien inclusion. But yeah, as I said, Draper and Fort look fantastic as well. So apart from that, it was pretty much, your standard Brisbane bully ball that we've seen the last 3 years. I don't think there's need to go in depth of it. It's just impressive to see all these other players. As I said, when they lose good players and you think, they're going to stuff up, as I said, Ryan Lester is still having one of the best seasons of his career late. As I said, Jasper Fletcher on the half-back line still gets the job done. Laramie Tunstall shows up on occasion, young player for Brisbane. You know, so yeah, it's just they just keep finding ways. They've got so much depth, and you know, technically they've got more players from the draft to come in. It's just Um, despite their ladder position, despite the fact that they've got a bit of separation from the upper echelon, and despite losing to Melbourne a couple of weeks ago, they have no doubt Brisbane are pretty much back in premiership sort of contention in terms of their metrics. They're not too far off where they were a couple of years ago or last year.
No,
the last 2 years.
They're looking to have found their adaptability again by rotating a couple of these players into their holes, like putting Ty Gallop in defense. Actually, a pretty genius idea for a young player to kind of get some experience down there. It's good to see Draper have some really solid effect in the ruck. Now getting to play some consistent footy. Oscar Allen, of course, is continuing to prove to the AFL world why he's such an important key forward. And then there's one key player that I definitely want to keep a close eye on this season, and that is Zach Bailey, purely for the fact that he's out of contract for this season. And his worth continues to rise.
Skyrocket. Yeah. Like I said, I don't know how much, but he's starting to become a bit more accurate in games. Like, I don't think he's had as many scoring shots this year, but he's had like a lot of sneaky couple of goal games. I'll check how much he's actually got for the year.
It's just also the fact that his work rate between the link up of midfield to forward is insane. He is one of the best to do it right now in the league. And that's not even to mention you've got your Dunkleys, your Neils, your McCluggages all there supporting him at the same time. And both of your Ashcrofts. It's a star-studded midfield. And yet he stands out so much. Just purely for what he's able to accomplish is insane.
Yeah. Looking at the stats, he's taken a few less scoring shots. He's got 10 goals for the season, which isn't bad, but his scoring involvements has actually jumped by almost 1.5. It was already high at 6.8, but now it's 8.2 per game so far, which is 27.4% of Brisbane's score involvements. Oh, sorry, he's involved in
he's involved in over a quarter of their score involvements
of their scoring plays.
That's monstrous effort, and that's not even just going off of the fact that how many centre bounces do they win, how many clearances do they get involving in each score involvement. There's so many other factors, but the fact that he's a two-way player, he's able to, he's got successful link ups 99% of the time, give or take. He's able to transition inside to outside if there's any important reason for him to do so. He's just such a well-rounded player, and there's a reason why he's probably the most important target on the market right now in terms of end of season.
Yeah, I'm not one to look at too many features like that, but Zach Bailey, it's almost a shame because I do think he should stay at Brisbane because I think he's just going to get so much more supply.
As much as he's that kind of player like Zach Butters that I would love in my midfield right now. Especially as we got a player like Prestia who will probably end up, even though Prestia's looking fantastic, he's getting on in age is the thing. We need someone to cover him that's younger.
The future there.
So as much as we would love a Zach Bailey, we would love a Zach Butters. I think Bailey is one of those players who should stay at Brisbane, who should be that one club player and retire.
But that looking to the future, they can't afford to play all their players. You would
not
have
with
to
how many
imagine
players
that
they have.
He's already achieved the ultimate success. He could chase a bit of money,
exactly,
and he deserves it too. So
it's no different to a player like Brandon Ellis. Won 2 premierships at Richmond, then went up to the Gold Coast to set up his future. There's nothing wrong with doing that once you achieve that ultimate goal. Unless Zach Bailey wants a Brownlow. Unless he wants a Brownlow, then maybe he'll stay.
So Zach Butters, I wouldn't be that upset if he went. I think it's more servitude. Maybe not even grand finals. I think a couple of prelims. If you've especially if you've been in part of like mediocre performance, been in part of good performances, like you've experienced a bit of both. I think you've like 7-ish years. Yeah, you're fine and go.
Yeah.
Like I can't really imagine being that mad. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
Yeah.
All right. Over on the MRO side of things, one little thing with Wayne Miller fined $1,000 for contact with an umpire. But that now brings us to our last game of the round, and who knew that it was going to be one of the best games of the round? We're going up to Canberra, where the Giants hosted North Melbourne, and with a 7-point margin down to the wire, 15-15, 105, 14-14, 98, the Giants' way.
Yeah, and I said in a round of floggings, some swinging margins. Like this game was pretty much close, basically from go to woe. Two teams on opposite side of the ladder, but pretty similar in terms of skill level. And it was an unarguable barn burner, easily the contest of the round. And it sort of played out the way you would expect. North trying to have stoppage dominance and letting Sherry overwhelm Madden in the midfield. Luckily, it did a decent cameo trying to support. Wasn't a long-term option, but at least changed things up. Whilst GWS use their returning forwards to pressure North, and they're trying but still weak defense. And the last quarter was probably one of the best watchable quarters of football to watch, barring maybe the second arc blunder. We didn't talk about it in the Saints game because that was, not that relevant. But it was weird that it was two separate arc review incidents in the same
in the same week,
same
day. Yeah.
Yeah. Which has actually caused the AFL to say that they're not going to, once the players resume, they are banning the arc from calling back play, which for better or for worse is what it is. But it is very AFL is just knee-jerking to issues that we were already questioning what might happen. But we're getting away from a good game. So it was a decent amount of pressure, lots of free-flowing footballs, goals being scored anywhere. Again, the incident I was talking about is when Griffin Loke appeared. Well, he clearly did touch the ball. When the Fox Footy commentary zoomed in, they showed a clear frame of him touching the ball. But the vision on the arc didn't pick that. They called it conclusively not touched, not even umpire's call. So they missed the frame that was zoomed in. And as I said, the play had stopped at that point. So
yep.
They had all the time in the world. They stuffed it up. Umpiring had been very weird this week. I think it was just a week to forget for the AFL.
Oh, yeah.
But
that's
in that last quarter...
It's brief sidetrack.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
But that is not the only issue in terms of a week the AFL need to forget. Like, we've got the Lance Collard stuff, the Zach Butters stuff, and now all the stuff with the arc. Yeah, there was another one. I'm already blanking on it.
Too much to remember.
Too much the AFL needs to forget because my God.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, Xavier O'Halloran, he was a bit of an X factor in the last quarter. Stringer, Cadman, Green all combined to finish them off. But again, it wasn't like there was no resistance. Sheasel, I think it was only really influential in the last quarter. But that centre clearance, like centre bounce goal, just to respond, just to be like, okay, we're not going to let a bad decision affect us. That was a really huge moment. And, their midfield core performed really well. Again, Dylan Stephens, he is legitimately becoming above average player when I just thought he was like, I was almost like, oh, you might as well discard him, last year. So, I'm really glad he's been able to improve his game.
Yeah.
And you know what? Like, it's not like everyone in North had a really good game. Trembath was a bit off. Unfortunately, loses his scoring streak of, I think it was about 10 games from his debut. Sorry, not scoring, goal streak. There's a few others. Darling was pretty quiet. Dersma, whatever. But yeah, as I said, it was, it was a lot in the areas you sort of expect from North, but it was still very good to see them perform at that level against a Giants team that seem to be stringing some things together. But yeah, I do think in general the Giants were a bit prettier to watch and a bit more consistent. I don't know if they deserve the win, but I do think they're tracking a bit more. But the fact that it was a very nice, very fun contest, really decent to watch. As I said, I honestly like that loss for North was probably more respectful than some of the other wins this season where they've just been like scoring off turnovers.
One thing I've been very impressed with from North is the inclusion of Luke Parker into the backline. I think it's actually opened up a lot of their movement, and it also has freed up Sheasel to do a lot more stuff in that midfield. It allows if Comben was in, it does free up a player like Charlie Comben, which he had a lot of effect last week against Richmond. To have a little bit more roaming freedom. And it just makes their backline look so much more reliable, which is really weird to say when that's always been their worst aspect.
It's also just changed their ball use and, idea. Because again, Parker is a very aggressive player, but as I say, it is very stark contrast to a very defensive, North Melbourne half back line. We've seen times where Caleb Daniels has tried to be offensive and has just shot him in the foot because his ball use, like last year, was absolutely terrible. It's improved a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I do want to say, also talking about fun, I don't know if you saw it, but the Parker Torp goal assist, I think it was to the Jack Darling goal.
I definitely missed this.
That was beautiful. But yeah, as I said, it was just like I said, it wasn't like a not a weekly highlight sort of thing, but it was one of those things where it was just like late. North Melbourne needed a spark, and as I said, he just torps one off the rebound. His Jack Darling, which leading into space, it was just really good. I think it was like a 60-meter pass or something. So, it was really fun, and Parker was really good late. Curtis had a really good game. Larky, as I said, he is absolutely fantastic.
I love
when North get the ball forward. Yeah, when North get the ball forward, they are really a threat. As I said, it's just their consistency doing it. As I said, they try to take advantage of Western Sydney Giants. Not the lack of Taylor. Their defense hasn't been good this year, and they did what they needed to do against them. It's just like the Giants were a bit more superior. Is what it is. They're around each other on the
they're sitting very similarly right now. It goes to show that North's rebuild is starting to hit like a really good moment in terms of their development. Like their backline is, especially with that Luke Parker inclusion, is starting to take a little bit more shape, which is good to see. Obviously the Giants.
Oh no, it's good to see a peak. Yeah.
Yes, Toby Pink.
Brent Daniels game.
Brent Daniels, yes. But also Toby Pink made a brief cameo in this game, covering for Charlie Comben, who was out late. It was good. It was very much was good to see Brent Daniels back in. He changes so much for this Giants lineup. The fact that they're still sitting at a position where they can still make probably at least one last finals tilt before they having to do a little bit more reshuffling. In terms of Josh Kelly, there's no guarantee he'll ever come back to the game after the amount of injuries he's had. In terms of their veterans, they're not really going to lose any, I don't think. I think Toby Green is one of their Toby Green and Jesse Hogan are their two oldest players, maybe.
Yeah.
They've still got at least another 1-2 years off anyway. So I don't think they'll lose anyone in terms of that. It's just more so the fact that maybe they need to bring in another ruck to kind of round out that midfield again. I know Nick Madden's doing some great work for being someone so young, but Kieran Briggs has had a really poor season, and it's why he's not getting played.
Yeah, that's just out of nowhere.
So maybe they have to start looking at something like that. Do they go into the mid-season draft if they have a pick and see what they can find? Do they look for someone to... I mean, Clayton Oliver is currently basically doing what Josh Kelly's role and is doing a fantastic job of it. But do they have to because I think their forward line actually looks really solid. Now that even though it is still a little hit and miss inside, like every now and then.
Lacks cohesion, but I think Brent Daniels coming back in. Like they need that distributor position, and they have him. They have backups. They just keep on losing them.
Yeah,
it's not fair.
Every time someone comes in, they get hit with another injury and just goes straight back down. It's why they're also missing Darcy Jones so much, because he does such a similar speedy role. But yeah, no, like it's only very minor questions for where Giants are currently sitting, but I think they're in a really good position otherwise. And back on North,
even
like
in this
I'm
bad
very
period,
impressed with what they've done so far this season.
And even in this bad period, it's like Phoenix Gothard's been a fair bit of a find. We've seen the improvement of players like Ryan Angwin and the Joe Fonte as well.
Joe Fonte
didn't have the best game. Actually, did he? Yeah, apparently he didn't play. He must have got injured or something.
No, he was suspended. He was suspended this week.
Oh, was he?
Yes.
Okay. I forgot about that. Anyway, so yeah, as I said, so pretty good signs. I think the Giants will slowly climb back up the ladder.
Yeah.
I imagine North will be slowly going back down the ladder, but I don't think either are going to be as drastic.
No, I think this could be the year that North finally like consistently stay out of the bottom four, just in terms of how they're tracking right now. But it might only be like bottom 5, bottom 6. Like it won't be a huge leap, at least to begin with.
Yeah, there's a slight chance to make finals, I would say, from what I've seen, but like they're not terrible. Definitely the most optimistic they've been in a long time.
Right, yeah. On the injury side of things, Charlie Coleman was laid out with an illness, so he'll be back in probably this week. And on the MRO side of things, Clayton Oliver was fined $1,000 for contact with an umpire. And the rising star has also been announced for this week, and it is none other than my boy Sam Grill. He had a fantastic game.
I'll be able to buy a vowel.
True. He only has, I don't know what his middle name is, but he has only one vowel in his first and last name, and I love that. 21 disposals at 86% efficiency. Like, fantastic game from him. Him and Cumming look really good together. Burton look fantastic. Like, I'm very impressed with our young kids so far. And, like, it's been so good to see his development, especially from the few games that I did get to see him from in the VFL last season. Like, he's such a good pickup, and I love that we're putting so much time into like this kind of core midfield. It's very young. Again, even though with Taranto and Hopper and Prestia in there, it's still going to be that little bit of inconsistent, especially when you're coming up against the more mature midfielders. But they're starting to gel really well, and I cannot be happier in terms of what I'm seeing. Apart from when we get absolutely demolished, but that's an inexperience.
Yeah. Look, as I said, I think you're working on the next core, and as I said, when you draft so many in 2020. 5, as I said. Leading into the 2025 season, I should have said.
Yes.
That's going to take a bit more than a couple of years. But, we've already seen some positives. As I said, it's just, finding a way to get the wins on the board. I think they've maybe gone back a step. Again, maybe they go on a run later in the season. Who knows? But, like, it doesn't look structurally that good so far. But in terms of individual players, they'll be
from what they showed against Melbourne. There's definitely opportunities to cause an upset or two later in the season, but we're just gonna have to bide our time on that one.
Exactly.
All right, let's jump over now to take a quick look at the ladder, because there's been a couple of changes. As you had mentioned, there is a big log jam of like the middle of the pack sort of area, but we'll start at the top with Sydney, Fremantle, and Hawthorn rounding out the top 3 on 24 points. Melbourne jumping up to 4th with their win against Richmond now on 20 points. The Brisbane Lions and North Melbourne rounding out top 6 on 16. And then from 7th to 10th, all also on 16 points, it's the Gold Coast Suns, Collingwood, Geelong, and the Western Bulldogs. The Western Bulldogs likely to continue to fall due to their injury woes. Whereas teams like Port Adelaide, St Kilda, the Adelaide Crows, and GWS, all sitting on 12 points, are looking to start punching up a little bit higher and start pushing more into that middle of the pack sort of area. And then rounding out...
Big game involving 2 of those teams too.
Oh, yeah.
That'll be a swing for the season.
That's going to be huge. And then rounding out the bottom four at this point in time is the West Coast Eagles, Carlton, Essendon, and Richmond with still 0 wins on the board.
Fortunately, hard to see that changing for the rest of the season.
I think there is one opportunity, there's at least one opportunity coming up, and that is actually this week. But we'll talk about that. But first,
not for Richmond winning, like the bottom four being.
For the bottom four,
teams.
Yeah, no, I don't expect that to change really at all, to be honest. Yeah. Maybe, Carlton, maybe. But I don't. If anything, that they're only going to jump up to 15th. If I'm honest, that's probably better.
What? Port and St Kilda or the Western Bulldogs would have to
The Western Bulldogs would have to lose their entire team. Really?
Yeah, they'll be like, we're committed to the tank from here.
I mean, honestly, they could use the couple of high draft picks. To be honest.
Kinda.
Anyway,
I wouldn't want to see it.
No one wants to see.
That's why they've expanded the finals, so the Western Bulldogs can get injured and still make finals,
and then they'll lose from 10.
Maybe. Hey, they were the first team to win outside the top 4 in the finals system,
and the modern era.
That's true. The first team from 10th.
That's true.
He knows.
All right, let's talk about Thursday night's game: Collingwood and Hawthorn at the MCG. This will be an absolute belter of a game. And I especially think because, granted, both teams coming off of a 5-day break, so both teams could be a little bit tired going into this game, might play a little bit of a slightly slower sort of matchup. But I think this is going to be a fantastic game to watch.
Well, it's like two very calculated teams. I can't remember if it was before. Like, Hawthorn are probably one of the best teams from going, switching from fast to slow. Whereas Collingwood play a bit more down-tempo, but they know when to burst from turnovers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be a very interesting game. I think the avenue that does lend Collingwood a bit of a opening, because otherwise I would just go Hawthorn. I think they're just too... they've proved too much this year for me to tip against them. But with their players that they have out in the forward line, they're going to have to not convert literally well, but keep their disposal usage inside 50 a bit tighter, because, again, step up in opponent in terms of defense. Collingwood is still being fairly reasonable on that point. So, as I said, it's a bit of a watch out, but unfortunately for Collingwood, I do think Hawthorn are just just too evenly good at the moment. Collingwood,
agree.
Their midfield isn't going to challenge him too much. They don't generate too much from that area, which is, again, the one area you might also say is a weakness for Hawthorn. But, as I said, I think there'll be periods of some good free-flowing games on the outside with a bit of stalling. I can definitely see this being a moments of fast scoring and then moments of a bit of a arm wrestle. So, but Hawks by reasonable amounts. It might even be towards 20 to 30 points at the end, but I don't think it will be a unrespectable blowout. I think it'll just be a moment of too much for Collingwood.
Yeah, I think so. I think the Hawks will put up a really solid defensive wall against their offensive efforts, and then kind of just slowly burst them down. And it'll probably end up going to a 30-something point margin, I would say, give or take. Maybe a little bit closer.
Yeah.
It'll just be dependent on what kind of midfield kind of shows up with. Well, because their midfield against the Bombers looked pretty good, but that was also against the Bombers. So if they're coming up against a more formidable team, what kind of defensive efforts are we going to see from them? Is kind of the big thing.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, jumping over to our Friday night games. If this game had happened earlier in the season, it would be an absolutely fantastic game to watch. But unfortunately, due to the Dogs' injuries, it is likely not meant to be the case. But the Dogs are hosting Fremantle at Marvel. And it's really unfortunate that this isn't going to be the absolute barn burner that it's meant to.
One thing I will say about that is I do respect the Doggies for dying, just so the this game is less exciting, maybe. Dogs could win. Who knows? Game of football. But the showdown, which the AFL, for some reason, they've finally given it a Friday night. I think they did last year. But mixed up with another game?
Yeah, they clashed it with another
come
game.
on.
I don't get
It's
it.
just, yeah. And it's also disrespectful for Fremantle, who also don't get many Friday games.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I understand, you put them in a Victorian away from home, make sure the crowds are good. But yeah, it's just so baffling. That aside, though, as you mentioned, like even the storyline of like Freo having those two big wins against the Doggies, any one of those go the other way, and it would have been Doggies in the final. So theoretically, this was a revenge game. Unfortunately, Freo is in an even better spot than they were last year, and the Dogs have just nosedived due to injury.
Yeah.
Again, coming up against one of the better defenses with most of their forward line missing, they're going to have to be creative, going to have to get a lot of midfield goals. Which, Fremantle aren't, that, it's not unheard of that they've given up those sort of runs before. I think a bit better this year, but, that's not too bad. But yeah, as I said, the Freo big men against the Bulldogs defense, I mean, that's almost just game over right there in terms of playing on paper.
Yeah,
not really much more to say.
It's just so unfortunate of the timing of this game because I think it generally would have ended up being one of the best games of the season.
Yeah.
Had the Bulldogs not been in the situation that they're in.
I think the most interesting matchup in terms of like what you look forward to, because again, just like from last year, just from the storyline of the Western Bulldogs trying to prove themselves, Fremantle trying to prove themselves, and at the start of the season, they were both looking to do that quite successfully. So it would have been nice for them to come together, but the footy gods work in mysterious ways, and we get probably what should be a one-sided contest. Who knows?
However, the showdown may not be a one-sided contest. This one could be an absolute barn burner.
Well, Adelaide are flawed, but theoretically should be looking better than they are. Port Adelaide probably theoretically should be looking worse than they are. And it's going to be interesting because the problems of Adelaide sort of overlap with Port Adelaide's strengths. Is like Adelaide have been less good with the ball in their back half, whereas Port Adelaide have again. Well, at least they employed the press last week. I'm not sure if it worked this week, but they're still generally good at blocking transition anyway. So it's really going to come down to the middle of the ground and how often Port Adelaide can feed their forward line. If they get a decent amount of inside 50s, I think Port's just going to find it hard to defend. And as we know, like momentum tends to happen. We know like a player like Rochelle or Rankin can just have moments. Even Dawson, obviously, even though you expected a bit more from him. Can make some moments that can get easy few run and goals. Conversely, Port need to convert a bit more going forward. As I said, they've left the door ajar for a lot of teams, despite some good work moving the ball inside 50. So generally, as I said, I think both teams are playing at the moment better than their ladder position. I think they're both around even. And, most times when we see this contest, it's when they're both either really, really good or really, really crap. Sorry, but both when one team's really good and one team's really crap. So it's actually interesting to see a fairly even showdown going into it. And hopefully it will be a cracker because, as I said, most times, at least I would say 3 out of every 5 contests are pretty good. Because obviously Crows won by 98 last year and that was like really disappointing and I really hated football for a while after that one. That was dismal.
That was not a great performance from the Power, but
honestly, probably one of Hinkley's worst. I think.
I think this showdown, I think, will make up for that, and I hope. Oh, I want to hope so. It will, and I think this could be a much closer game than people may think. And again, showdowns.
What are you tipping?
9 times out of 10 are normally pretty close and pretty entertaining. I'm probably still going to tip the Crows. It is probably the safer tip. But I generally I would not be opposed to a Port Adelaide upset because I think it would make the storyline so much more better.
Yeah. All right. Shall we go on to Saturday, which is another
Yes.
four game event?
Yes, starting with the Sam Draper Cup, as I am now dubbing it, with the Bombers
Good.
hosting the Brisbane Lions at Marvel Stadium.
Yeah, well, as I said, hopefully Nick Bryan might make the ruck contest a bit more interesting if he returns. But otherwise, again, from Essendon, I think they want to limit Brisbane's inside midfield dominance, but like as we've said, Brisbane can shift to the outside just as easily, and that's where Essendon just plain suck.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's going to be moments because yeah, Brisbane just have avenues. You know what I mean? Like when we talk about games and like avenues to win, you know, as I said, it's a mixture of like what team strengths are and where feasibly other team can limit it. And as I said, like Essendon just have no limit, no capacity to limit outside movement. And Brisbane just convert a lot from it, get decent amount from turnovers, and should be easy victors.
Yeah, I
But
expect.
again, it's all about being respectable.
Yes, I do expect Brisbane to absolutely thump the Bombers here. But if the Bombers are at least able to show a little bit more consistency like they'd showed over the past couple of weeks prior to them losing to Collingwood, and not having to rely too much on like the defensive efforts of Archie Roberts to try and save them, and Al Hooley, who actually, as we had mentioned, did have a fantastic game against Collingwood.
Yeah.
If they don't have to rely too much on their halfback movement, and like their midfielders start trying to put a little bit more pressure on that star-studded lineup, I definitely think it could be more of an entertaining game. But I expect Brisbane to win this outright.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't think there's too much more to say about that.
No, but there could be a little bit more to say on this one, where the Eagles will host Richmond over at Optus. And this is, if I'm going to be honest, this is probably the only game that I can see, at least in the first half of the season, where Richmond could potentially sneak a win. I was very impressed with what we showed against Melbourne. There is a high possibility of Nankervis coming back in this week, which would be really good because again that frees Bolter back up to go back into defense, or if we need to float him up forward, we can do that as well.
Yeah.
Benefits of a swingman. I think our midfield looks a lot more solid this week with Taranto being out, and because him and Hopper kind of play that same sort of role. It'll be really interesting to see what happens if both of them are back in. And yeah, like I think our backline I think matches up fairly well against the West Coast forward line. I think our forward line matches up in terms of experience with the West Coast backline. Again, this will also be a game where we'll see some former friends. You get to clash with Minnie and Baker, Tyler Young as
Yeah.
well. So it'll be a very interesting sort of game in that regard. On the Eagles side of things, again, if they show that little bit more grunt, that even though that they're missing from two of their more tougher midfielders, if Harley Reid does get tagged, if he's able to shake that and kind of show a little bit more of that midfield presence that he was able to do in some.
I
of
don't
his
think
better
Richmond
games.
are tagging.
Probably.
I don't think they can they?
We can. We
Hopper?
can. No, it
Like,
wouldn't be
if
Hopper.
he
It would be
plays
like
that role with.
It'd be like a Jack Ross kind of player. Someone with that
Okay. Oh, yeah, he does tag
more of
occasionally.
the speed,
Yeah.
more of the bit like more of the upper body strength to kind of
Yeah.
keep a player accountable. I don't
Fair enough.
expect it too much. It might be like a light type, like a run with kind of role if we were to do something like that.
Yeah.
Um,
I was going to say I would rather focus on offense rather than defense against
yeah,
West Coast midfield.
I think a lot of it will end up probably being a lot more offensive based. Again, like if Lawler is able to do what he was able to do against Melbourne for during that first half, I think it's going to be a very fun midfield battle. However, yeah, like this is
Yeah.
it's not a guarantee that Richmond are going to win this. It's not a guarantee that West Coast will win this. It's very much one of those 50-50 spoonball games. But
Yeah.
I hope we can sneak a win out here.
Yeah, because as I said, West Coast are a bit vulnerable. I think you're starting to like take away the goodwills of the two wins if they just lose to Richmond, relatively easily. Because again, then Richmond gets a high percentage, and even though you got two wins, you're still sitting on a pretty bad 55.8%. So again, I think it will be interesting to see. Again, I think this is the big thing for the Spoonballs is like ball use tends to be better than you think because look, Richmond do put a bit of pressure, but like West Coast don't. So
Yeah.
I think that basically ball use tends to be a bit of, so you get to see a bit more of what teams' best outcomes are, and as I said, it will be interesting to see what Richmond can do more so, because I think they might be able to outscore the Eagles. Like, I don't think they've been that bad over the last couple of weeks, and I would, dare I say it, I think I might actually tip Richmond. I might tip Richmond.
This is one of the very few times this year that I'm going to be tipping us. So,
yeah.
I can only hope. I can only hope for a win. If not, I can really hope for at least another consistent performance. If we run out of legs in the fourth, we run out of legs in the fourth. Young, inexperienced team. It's just how it is. But otherwise, if we're able to kind of produce what we did against Melbourne for at least a solid 3 quarters, I'd be happy with that.
Yeah.
All right, jumping over now to a game that could be interesting. Could be an absolute demolition. Who knows? But Geelong hosting North Melbourne in Geelong.
I think it's just because it's a North's first actual test for the year of its side with any finals probable capabilities. I think. Maybe they've gotten beaten by a good team. I don't know, but they've had a soft draw. And as for Geelong, they just need a bounce back. They normally do, and they have a really good record against North Melbourne. It's normally not even being close.
The only team that they've massively been tested against that is a quote unquote top 6, top 4, whatever kind of caliber is Brisbane. And that was only that was only a 26-point loss in the Barossa. That's not a huge loss either.
It's fine-ish. Yeah. So fair enough. But again, North need to take good scalps, and as I said, the last few margins have been 101, 40, and 75. So, it's about limiting scoring options. It's about using your midfield to get a bit of conversion. Because again, Geelong really don't care if you win the clearances as much. I know I said before with the Gold Coast game, but again, that was a combination of both Geelong's ball use being terrible and losing the clearances, where they just found no way to gain meterage. Whereas normally they can find a bit of back half movement. So again, this North are either going to have to put a lot of pressure locking the ball in or set up a bit better down the field. Because as I said, offensively, they've picked up on the outside. I do think they are a bit of a Swiss cheese team. And generally, Geelong are good at that. And I didn't talk about this in the Port game, but this is also an aspect where, as I said, it's actually, I think, harder for offensive-based teams to match up against Geelong because, again, the more you try and make it the offensive game, the more Geelong are able to outrun you. They'll sacrifice defense to boost attack.
Yeah.
And as I said, that's why in the Port game, where you did limit their attacking options, it really dried up. They looked a whole different team. And I just don't think North are set up for it. So again, as I said, it may be just another North game where they run up 20 and 30 points with a team that are respectable enough. Which, might be bad signs, but I think that's just what you got to do with these two style of teams. I don't see North overtaking it except for a bad Geelong game.
Yeah, no, I don't expect North to outright win this. But just with the improvements that we've seen of them over the past few weeks, I definitely think they could take advantage of the fact that Geelong won't have a decent ruck for a little bit. Again, they're still missing a little bit of that outside run with no Grant Myers. So they were able to maybe attempt to stifle that a little bit more as we saw over the game just gone with Port. Not that that's really something North is going to do.
Exactly.
But there's some adaptability that they could maybe attempt. Otherwise, I just with us, with West Coast, with Essendon, just like to see some more consistency out of their development because they are looking fairly solid in terms of their development process as a young rebuilding team. And now if they're able to actually make this a very decent, very close game, against a team that is like likely top 4 potential, it goes a long way in terms of like where they're at and where they're trying to get to.
Yeah, exactly. Rightio. Shall we move on to interesting for other reasons game?
Yes, Carlton and St Kilda at Marvel.
In the famous words of Ross Lyon, if you take the win-loss out of the equations, like there's maybe some improvement from last year.
True. The way you look at this game is it's Tom de Koning and Jack Silvani against the Royal Club. And there's like that's kind of all there really is to this game. Is it like are they are they gonna prove the Carlton haters the Carlton fans wrong and that the money making was worth it? Or is this going to be another St Kilda game where they're just so disappointing?
I think there like could be a legitimately interesting game like from this, just because these two teams' best footy are both actually decent and surprisingly attainable in this contest. You know, we know that Carlton present well when you can bring the ball to ground. You know, while St Kilda are a very like direct, like a marking base team, it's not like a lot of marks. And they like the way they play, like the ball has to go to ground sometimes. So like Carlton actually get a decent chance to play the game that they want to play. That just hasn't been consistent. But again, like when Carlton struggle, like that long, the long defensive thing, protecting the long kicks down the line, like tends to get worse late in games, or at least like earlier in the season. I think it's improved in the last 2 weeks. But this will be the test.
Yeah.
So, like, I guess you just tip St Kilda, don't have any faith in it, and you just take the contest for what it is, in my opinion.
That's the way that
I do honestly think this is a 50-50. I don't actually think that, like, there's much in between. Like, I know it's silly because Carlton just statistically seems so far back.
If you're going a safe tip, you go St Kilda, but you don't have any faith in it.
You need to win your competition
because of the fact you know they're so inconsistent. If they do try and back it up after following on from what they did to West Coast, you can expect to see some fairly solid performances. Liam Ryan had a fantastic game against his old club last week, and you can probably expect him to have a similar performance here. Cooper Sharman is likely just about to pen a 2-year extension on his contract. You might see some very positive stuff from him this week. More from Windhager, more from Naz, more from Hugo Garcia will be always nice. Sinclair, Wilkie putting on another All-Australian performance in that back line. If those key players, Jack Higgins kicking 5 goals last week. We didn't really mention it, but he had a great game. If those like sort of key players are able to continue on that solid run of form, then you should expect St Kilda to win this. But because we know St Kilda is so inconsistent, it's so hard to kind of bet against, like to bet with them. And there's definitely a chance that Carlton could come out of the gates here with something decent.
Yeah, and I know you can't dissect every game into just like quarter vacuums, but like I do legitimately think they've probably had about the same number of good quarters between them.
I agree.
So
they're both teams
roughly evenish
that have always kind of sat in very similar positions. It's just about whether someone comes out actually having a decent game, or it's the complete opposite because they're so inconsistent.
Yeah. Rightio. So a bit of a quieter Sunday, but 2 games that should be very interesting. Especially the first game, which we go to Sydney for.
Yes, we are going. This game. Previously we would call it the Brodie Grundy Cup. This is now going to be called the Simon Goodwin Cup because he's now an assistant coach at Sydney. But yes, the Swans and the Demons at the SCG, and this will be a really fun one, I think.
Yeah, and technically 2 teams that have played pretty close to each other in recent times. Oh, sorry, not in recent times, but like Melbourne actually smashed them last year, but I guess Sydney were sort of struggling in that earlier part
That
of the
was
season.
that was also the part where Sydney had some slight injury woes. Um,
Yeah,
prior to their breakthrough
but
against. No, sorry, actually that was after. I was thinking about the Freo
yeah,
game, but I'm like, no, Freo beat them there. Yeah,
yeah.
there's a period in there somewhere where they came back, but yeah, it's always an interesting
I
matchup
just
with
was
these two
saying, like,
teams.
they're two different teams than they were last year.
Yes,
So it's sort of a soft reset without actually being a reset because the core players are similar. But again, Melbourne, uh, yeah, they're very, ideally fast and exciting. I think there may be a wall, though, I suspect, with Sydney, um, where Sydney could probably just apply a bit too much pressure, cause a few too many turnovers. I think, probably just opening up the scoring because I can't really see the way Melbourne's been playing that Sydney's territory dominance is going to stop in any way, shape, or form. Like Melbourne, like unlike the last 2 years, aren't restrictive of the outside movement.
yeah,
And as we've been talking about, even with Gordon out, Sydney just looks so strong in that department. So it's going to be the inside midfield. Like, how disciplined can Melbourne be? We know how good they are offensively. Can they do the small things to try and adjust? Obviously, they're probably going to see Heaney back, which would just add to the potency of Sydney's midfield offense. And yeah, it's just going to be a really good test for Melbourne. Like, I don't think many people are going to tip them, despite being relatively similar places on the ladder. But geez, I really think they can prove themselves.
oh,
And,
100%.
yeah, as I said, it's just more, keeping those backs accountable. And, I do think, like, the way that their backs are structured, if they do contain the midfield, which is the big caveat, they can restrict Kerno enough. Like, when I say that, to under 4 goals. You know, or at least,
Yeah, with the fact that
yeah,
like
they could,
their only like major player that can shut him down is probably Lever. Um,
yeah.
that's like, and even
I think
then,
it's just
like
systematic
Lever,
though.
yeah, it is
You
very
know,
much systematic. Like you've got Lever, you've got
when
Disco.
Turner's allowed a little bit of space,
Um, yeah,
Howes doesn't have as much pressure on him. As the Melbourne do look a bit better, but they're not a defensive teams by any stretch of the imagination.
and even then, like,
So again, protection.
and even then, you've got to also make sure that Gorn doesn't, casually float down to defense and like shut down any of that sort of offensive movement that Sydney have been
Yeah.
have been successfully doing as of late. And that's where Grundy comes in as well, because like the matchup between these two is always fantastic over recent years,
Yeah.
and it's going to be so
And Grundy
interesting to
offensively
see.
has been good too.
Mm,
So it could just be Gorn has to play legitimately on Grundy rather than being able to play spare back, which is puts Melbourne on the back foot a tiny bit more. So
yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how this matchup goes. I will likely be tipping Sydney, at
yeah.
least off the bat. That might change later in the week, but this is probably going to be one of the better matchups of the week, I think.
Yeah, it's like still 65% Sydney, but I think there's just the interest into Melbourne, how they respond, because again, we did see them have the right ideas, but come up very short against Freo. Obviously, the shock loss against Essendon.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what I mean? It's just about making sure that they find a way to limit those, because as I said, it's a very fine line between being, as I said, with the diverse age profile of their list. As I said, it's one of those things where they have the core to be sustainable, but the string can easily unravel. And yeah, Melbourne away could. Sorry, yeah, Melbourne playing away. It probably is just a bit much for them. But we expect respectability.
Absolutely.
From what we've seen.
All right, last game of the round, and it's a classic: the Expansion Cup between the Suns and the Giants. There was a like a social media post made like yesterday, from the Giants social media team, where out of the three quote unquote expansion teams, in this case it being them, the Suns, and the Tassie Devils. They were the only ones to win this last week. So they were the only one flying the expansion flag. But here we get our actual expansion cup clash. And I think that even though the Suns are very much favoured in this matchup, I think the Giants are going to bring on a show. And they're going to absolutely surprise them.
And we often forget like how dominant the Giants have actually been in this head-to-head. I think like Gold Coast, they've only won a couple of times in their history against the Giants.
I think the Giants have most wins at the moment between these two teams. But in terms of like actual like when it's been their close games, like they've always been fairly evenly matched.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, it's always been a bit like bigger brother vibe, but obviously the way with this season's gone, it's so hard to tell because obviously like the trajectory they're starting to meet in the middle. It's just whether, the Gold Coast Suns, they've got enough talent, they've got enough players available to get the win. You compare the injury lists and it's night and day, and yet there's still enough wherewithal in the Giants. And honestly, you say where you will about the Giants and their like offensive stoppage work, they do defend from stoppages fairly well. And as I said, when the Suns have that dry up for them, it's going to be harder. But on the flip side, Suns look so much better when they win stoppages, which is like the difficult thing, because it opens up so much more of their forward play. We know that their forward line is still a bit young. It's much improved, but it's still not fantastic.
Yeah.
So it's going to be how much the Suns are able to link up with their forward line. And of course with the Giants, it's going to be how much ball movement they can get, because they have been great moving the ball. They've got some, offensive threats. So again, it's going to be interesting battle, Suns defense versus the Giants attack. But I back in the Giants. I think the Suns have it's so hard because, like, theoretically, the Suns should improve in areas, but also not.
Yeah, it's kind of hard.
It's just how much the clearance. It's just whether the fact that they're not winning the clearances or their midfield core is legitimately off. It's just hard to tell at the moment. So I've tipped boring a lot of the week, so I'm going to tip the Giants here.
I think I'm leaning towards the Giants on this one. I think the Giants have shown a little bit more promise in the past couple of weeks. I think their structure, especially when they've gotten their injuries back, mostly Brent Daniels, let's be real, has made them look so much better. Stringer, Hogan, even Riccardi have looked decent. Cadman looked good. When he's not been shut down. They have some really, really, again, and their backline is still fantastic. But now that they've got all their pieces back again.
Yeah, I think the biggest concern for the Suns is, again, they've got to stop this 100-point run. Because, again, it's been the last 4 games, and they're up against a very poor forward line. So, I would say, you can't be, like, saying, like, oh, that's the most important thing for the Suns. Because they're playing at a point where winning. You can't be, like, looking at these small victories. But if they don't win, they need to at least limit the Giants to under 100. Otherwise, I think it's going from red flags to alarm bells. For them.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the Giants are definitely gonna. I won't say like surprise, quote unquote, but I think they're gonna show a lot more. In this clash, and hopefully sneak out a win, because I don't think they get a win on the Gold Coast very often, or in Queensland in general. So it'd be good to add one to the New South Wales tally in that regard.
Yeah. Maybe against Brisbane. I think they've got a really impressive. I'm going to look up their head.
Maybe early on when Brisbane were in that rebuilding phase of the 2010s. But not so much in recent years, I don't think.
Anyway, I'm going to check it up. Is this Final Zone head-to-head matchups? Here we go.
It'll be in there somewhere.
Team 2, Collingwood, Gold Coast, Giants. Let's see. All games, they have won 5, lost. Oh, sorry. Giants have 16 wins. Gold Coast have 5 wins since 2011.
Against Brisbane or against each other?
Against each other. I don't know about Brisbane.
Oh, okay. So Giants are very much leading the way of the Expansion Cup. Good to know.
Yeah, GWS actually has a winning record. 10 wins against Brisbane, 9 wins. 10 wins to Giants, 9 wins to Brisbane since 2012.
I was gonna say, I assume a lot of those wins probably came again in that rebuilding area of the 2010s against Brisbane.
Brisbane were pretty. You forget how trash they were.
They
in, like,
were horrific
18
in the 2010s. It was crazy.
Yeah.
But that's no difference. That's no different, like saying to Richmond. Like, we were horrific in the 2000s, apart from like a couple of patches here and there, and then we finally hit our stride in the 2010s. That's part of the rebuild.
Yeah, exactly. So as I said, I actually think that Giants have a lot. A good thing. In fact, the last 5 games there's been 3 Giants, 2 Lions. So even more modern.
That'll be an interesting matchup to look at when that comes around. But yeah, for the Expansion Cup, I'm going to go the Giants on that one. And that brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you all so much for liking, commenting, subscribing, and coming to hang out with us this week. Are you up to much this week?
Let me think. Probably not. Yeah. I don't think I am. I'll go to another concert. That'll be nice.
Oh, yeah.
Going to my cuz. Technically, my cuz was there the last concert. It was actually pretty funny because, as I said, it was at the nightclub. It was a lot high energy, and obviously I was in the upper. There was like a upper area.
Oh, yes.
Standing. What do you call it? Balcony sort of thing. But obviously on the ground level there was a mosh pit. So like beforehand, I was like texting and I was like, "Oh, so my cousin, she was in the crowd and all that." And then like the first mosh pit started, and like all bashed in together. Apparently she stayed there for the whole time, but I could not see her after that. So I had to text her after the concert, and I was like, "Hey, like I trust that you know how to take care of yourself, but like you are alive still, aren't you?"
Always double check.
Yes. So yeah, we're going to Teen Jesus and the Gene Teasers, which would be a much more calm event. My aunt's even joining us, which is cool.
That's cool.
So yeah, it's just a little family one. Should be nice. Yeah.
I don't have too much on this week. I think packing for the move is still mostly the big thing for me this week. I am going to do like a little lunch thing with some friends as like a farewell cut. I nearly leave what suburb I live in there. Farewell my suburb. Because I'm moving out to a different suburb.
Yeah.
So that'll be nice because again, I've been here 3 years now. So it's a little bit of a farewell. Which is going to be really sad because I love the food here. I'm gonna miss it so much.
Oh, it's a great place to visit.
It is. But yeah, so we're gonna do that I believe on Saturday after work. We're gonna do like a lunch thing, which will be nice. And yeah, there's not much else after that. It's mostly hopefully watching some footy. Actually on Thursday, I'm going into the city on a little city adventure because someone I've been friends with for quite a few years now has recently moved back to Victoria. We've never met. So we're gonna finally get to meet for the first time, which will be really nice. I'm looking forward to that. She's a Collingwood supporter. So downsides to that, but upsides to being friends.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah,
that sounds awesome.
Just a bit of a social weekend as I pack up my life and move it 20 minutes away.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you all so much for coming hang out with us this week. I hope this week of footy treats your team very well. And we will see you all next week for episode 104. So until then, take care.